In 1902, a German expedition digging through the ruins of ancient Babylon pulled something out of the sand that shouldn't exist, a clay tablet covered in cuneiform. And when they finally translated it decades later, buried in the text was something that made no sense, a detailed breakdown of human blood. 4 distinct types, each one described with specific characteristics, each one assigned a different purpose. The tablet predates modern blood type discovery by over 4,000 years. Karl Landsteiner won a Nobel Prize in 1930 for discovering ABO blood groups. But according to this tablet, the Sumerians already knew. They knew about type O, type A, type B, and type AB. They knew the differences, and according to their records, they knew because they created them. Here's where it gets darker. The tablet doesn't describe these blood types as natural variations. It describes them as engineered, deliberate, created for specific functions in what the text calls the great work. And the beings who did this weren't human. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, the ones who came from the sky. By the end of this, you're going to see your own blood type in a completely different light, because if this tablet is telling the truth, the blood running through your veins right now wasn't an accident of evolution. It was a design choice. And the purpose it was designed for might not be what you think. Let's start with what we actually know versus what we've been told. The tablet in question is cataloged as NBC 11276 in the Babylonian collection at Yale University. Most scholars dismiss it as mythological, religious poetry, metaphorical, but here's what they can't dismiss. The tablet contains anatomical knowledge that shouldn't exist in 2000 BCE. It describes the heart as a pump. It identifies the liver's role in blood production. It maps out a circulatory system that wouldn't be discovered until William Harvey in 1628. And buried in the middle of this medical text is a section that divides humanity into 4 blood categories. The Sumerian terms translate roughly as original human, earth worker, sky gift, and divine mixture. We know them as O, A, B, and AB. The tablet says the original human, type O, came first. It describes this blood as pure and unchanged from the first creation. According to the text, this was the blood of the primitive worker, the Lulu, the ones created before the genetic modifications began. Type O was the baseline, the control group. The blood of humans before the Anunnaki decided to upgrade the species. And here's what makes this disturbing. Type O is universal. It can donate to any other blood type. In modern medicine, we call type O negative universal donor. The Sumerian tablet calls it the source blood and the foundation of all others. They're describing the same thing, but they're describing it 4,000 years before we figured it out. The tablet goes further. It says type O humans were created for labor in the fields and mines, physical work, endurance, strength, and when you look at the global distribution of type O blood, something interesting emerges. The highest concentrations are in indigenous populations, the ones who lived closest to the earth, hunter-gatherers, agricultural societies, the people who worked the land. In Central and South America, type O makes up 100% of some indigenous populations. In Australia, Aboriginal populations are almost entirely type O. In Africa, certain tribes are 90% or higher type O. These are the populations that modern anthropology says are genetically closer to our ancestors. The Sumerian tablet says these are the ones who kept the original blood, the unmodified line. But then something changed. According to the tablet, the Anunnaki weren't satisfied with the Lulu. The primitive workers were strong but not intelligent enough. They could dig and carry and build, but they couldn't create. They couldn't plan. They couldn't manage complex tasks. So the Anunnaki decided to engineer a new version, a hybrid that could think. The tablet describes this as mixing the blood of the gods with the blood of the earth. It says the Anunnaki took their own genetic material and introduced it into select humans. The result was type A blood. The tablet calls it the blood of the thinking servant. Type A appears around 25,000 to 15,000 BCE, according to genetic studies. Right around the same time that human civilization starts to accelerate, agriculture develops, settlements form, hierarchies emerge, written language appears, and it all happens first in one specific region, Mesopotamia, where the Sumerians said the Anunnaki landed. The geographic distribution of type A blood tells a story. The highest concentrations are in Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. The regions where civilization developed first where cities were built, where writing was invented, where social structures became complex. The tablet says Type A was created to organize the workers and manage the great projects, to think, to plan, to create order. And here's what's disturbing about Type A from a medical perspective. Type A blood has a higher susceptibility to stress-related illness, higher rates of anxiety, elevated cortisol response. It's as if Type A physiology is wired for mental work at the expense of physical resilience. The tablet describes Type A humans as fragile in body but strong in mind. Modern medicine sees the same pattern. Type A also has higher rates of certain cancers, particularly stomach cancer, higher rates of cardiovascular disease, a weaker immune response to certain pathogens. It's as if the genetic modification that enhanced cognitive function came with trade-offs. Vulnerabilities. The tablet acknowledges this. It says the Anunnaki sacrificed the strength of the flesh for the power of thought, but the modifications didn't stop there. The tablet describes a third creation, Type B blood. It calls this the blood of the wanderer and the gift of the northern gods. According to the text, Type B wasn't created in Mesopotamia. It was engineered later in a different location by a different group of Anunnaki, the ones who had traveled to the cold lands beyond the mountains. Genetic evidence puts the origin of Type B blood in the Himalayan highlands between 15,000 and 10,000 BCE. Mongolia, Tibet, Central Asia, far from Mesopotamia. The tablet says this group of Anunnaki needed humans who could survive in harsh environments, extreme cold, high altitude, limited resources. So they created Type B with different characteristics. Type B has the most unique immune system of all blood types. It produces different antibodies. It responds differently to viruses and bacteria. It's almost as if it was designed for a different environment with different pathogens. The tablet says Type B humans were created to endure what others cannot and to survive where the earth worker and the thinking servant would perish. And the geographic distribution backs this up. Type B is highest in Central and East Asia. Mongolia has the highest concentration of Type B in the world, up to 40% in some populations. Japan, Korea, China, India all have significant Type B populations. These are regions with extreme environmental variation. Mountains, deserts, frozen steppes, places that require adaptability. But Type B has another characteristic that the tablet specifically mentions. It calls Type B the blood of the questioner, and says these humans were less obedient than the earth worker, more restless than the thinking servant. They were wanderers, nomads, the populations that didn't settle, that kept moving. And when you look at history, Type B populations were the nomadic empires, the Mongols, the Huns, the Scythians, the horse cultures that swept across Asia and terrified settled civilizations. The tablet describes Type B as having the spirit of the wild and being difficult to control. It sounds like a design flaw. Or maybe it was intentional. Maybe the Anunnaki in the northern regions needed humans who could think independently, who could make decisions without constant supervision, who could adapt and improvise. The tablet suggests this was a calculated risk. It says the northern Anunnaki valued strength of will over obedience, and that decision would have consequences. Because according to the tablet, Type B humans eventually rebelled. The text describes a conflict between the southern Anunnaki, who controlled the Type A populations in Mesopotamia, and the northern Anunnaki, who had created Type B. It calls it the War of the Bloods, and says it lasted for generations. Type B populations, driven by their restless nature, began to migrate south. They clashed with Type A civilizations. They refused to submit to the hierarchies that Type A had built. And this isn't just mythology. This is documented in archaeology. Around 10,000 to 8,000 BCE, there's evidence of massive population movements from Central Asia into the Middle East and Europe. Nomadic groups displacing settled agricultural communities. Genetic mixing, cultural upheaval. The archaeological record calls it the Neolithic expansion. The Sumerian tablet calls it the War of the Bloods. But the conflict created a problem. Type A and Type B populations were mixing, interbreeding, and the offspring weren't matching either parent's blood type. They were producing something new, something the tablet says the Anunnaki didn't plan for. Type AB. According to the tablet, Type AB appeared around 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. It's the newest blood type, the rarest. And the tablet describes it in terms that sound almost like a mistake. It calls type AB the unplanned mixture and the child of two purposes. It says the Anunnaki debated whether type AB should be corrected or allowed to continue. They chose to allow it. But the tablet suggests this decision was controversial. It describes type AB as having the mind of the thinking servant and the will of the wanderer, intelligence combined with independence, cognitive ability without obedience. The tablet calls this dangerous and says type AB humans were watched closely. And type AB is strange from a medical perspective. It has characteristics of both type A and type B, but it also has unique properties that neither parent type has. Type AB can receive blood from any type, making it the universal recipient, the opposite of type O, the universal donor. The tablet calls type AB the blood that takes from all and describes it as incomplete without the others. Type AB also has the most complex immune system. It produces both A and B antigens. It has a higher resistance to certain autoimmune disorders, but a higher susceptibility to others. It's almost as if the immune system is confused, unsure which programming to follow. The tablet describes type AB as struggling between two natures. But here's where the tablet gets specific in a way that's hard to dismiss. It lists physical and psychological characteristics for each blood type. Traits, tendencies, predispositions. And when you compare these ancient descriptions to modern medical research on blood type personalities and health patterns, they align. Type O, the tablet says, is strong in body, simple in thought, loyal in service. Modern studies on blood type personalities describe type O as practical, grounded, physically resilient, and less prone to abstract thinking. The overlap is disturbing. Type A, according to the tablet, is weak in body, complex in mind, anxious in spirit. Modern research shows type A individuals have higher rates of anxiety, stress-related disorders, and cerebral dominance. They're more analytical, more detail-oriented, more prone to overthinking. The tablet knew this. Type B is described as restless in nature, independent in will, resistant to command. Modern personality research on type B shows higher rates of nonconformity, creativity, and resistance to authority. Type B individuals are statistically more likely to be entrepreneurs, artists, and innovators. The tablet predicted this. And type AB, the tablet says, is divided in purpose, uncertain in path, seeking balance between earth and sky. Modern studies on type AB show higher rates of identity complexity, adaptability, and what psychologists call cognitive flexibility. They're the mediators, the ones who can see multiple perspectives. The tablet described this thousands of years ago. But the tablet doesn't just describe personalities, it describes purposes, functions, roles that each blood type was designed to fulfill in what it calls the Great Work. And according to the text, that work is still ongoing. The tablet says type O was created to maintain the earth and serve the physical needs of the gods. In modern terms, labor, agriculture, construction, the backbone of civilization. And when you look at global demographics, type O populations are still concentrated in regions that provide the world's food, resources, and physical labor. Type A was created to organize the work and maintain the systems of control, administration, government, management. The tablet describes type A as the builders of order from chaos. And in modern society, type A is overrepresented in bureaucratic roles, administrative positions, and organizational structures. Type B was created to explore and adapt and survive in the unknown. Pioneers, innovators, the ones who push boundaries. The tablet says type B was meant to expand the territory of the gods, and type B populations historically were the explorers, the settlers of new lands, the ones who ventured into the unknown. Type AB, the tablet says, exists to bridge the divided and unite the purposes. Diplomats, mediators, synthesizers, the ones who can navigate between different groups and perspectives. The rarest blood type serving the most specialized function. And if you step back and look at human civilization as a whole, you see these roles playing out. Type O providing the foundation, type A creating the structure, type B pushing the edges, type AB connecting the pieces. It's almost as if society itself is organized around these blood type functions. But the tablet goes further. It says these blood types weren't just designed for organizational purposes. They were designed for spiritual purposes, for consciousness purposes, for what the text calls the ascension of the species. According to the tablet, the Anunnaki didn't just want workers. They wanted humanity to evolve into something more, something that could eventually join the gods in the heavens. But different blood types had different capacities for this evolution, different limitations, different potentials. Type O, the tablet says, is bound to the earth. It has the strongest connection to physical reality, the material world, but the weakest connection to what the text calls the divine frequency. Type O was designed to be grounded, rooted, connected to the planet. But that same grounding makes spiritual transcendence more difficult. And there's something to this. Studies on meditative states, mystical experiences, and psychic phenomena show that Type O individuals report these experiences less frequently than other blood types. They're more skeptical of abstract spiritual concepts, more focused on tangible physical reality. The tablet knew this would be the case. Type A, according to the tablet, has a stronger connection to thought realms and mental planes of existence. The text describes Type A as being able to perceive patterns invisible to the earthworker. And modern studies on cognitive function show that Type A individuals have different brainwave patterns during deep focus. They enter flow states more easily. They report higher rates of synchronicities and meaningful coincidences. But the tablet also says Type A has a weakness. It calls it the trap of the mind. Type A can get lost in thought, in analysis, in mental constructs that disconnect from reality. The tablet warns that Type A must guard against the illusion of knowledge and remember that thought without action serves no purpose. Type B, the tablet says, has the strongest will force and spirit fire. It describes Type B as being closest to the Anunnaki's own nature, independent, willful, capable of manifesting intention into reality. But this strength comes with danger. The tablet warns that Type B can break the natural order and must learn restraint or face destruction. There's a suggestion in the text that Type B was the blood type most likely to develop what we might call supernatural abilities. The text describes Type B individuals who could command the elements and see beyond the veil of time. But it also describes Type B individuals who went mad with power, who tried to challenge the Anunnaki themselves. And Type AB, according to the tablet, has the most complex spiritual potential. It calls Type A B the bridge between worlds, and says these individuals can walk in both the realm of flesh and the realm of spirit. But this dual nature creates instability. The tablet says Type AB must constantly balance opposing forces, or risk shattering into fragments. Modern psychological studies on Type AB show me higher rates of dissociative experiences, identity fluidity, and what Jung would call integration challenges. Type AB individuals report feeling pulled in multiple directions, struggling to maintain a coherent sense of self. The tablet predicted this struggle thousands of years ago. But here's what's really disturbing about all of this. The tablet doesn't describe these blood types as equal. It describes them as hierarchical. It ranks them. And the ranking isn't based on superiority or inferiority. It's based on something else, something the tablet calls the divine percentage. According to the text, each blood type contains a different ratio of Anunnaki DNA to original human DNA. Type O has the least Anunnaki genetics. It's the most human, the closest to what the species was before the genetic engineering began. The tablet puts this at around 97% human, 3% Anunnaki. Type A has more Anunnaki genetics. The tablet estimates around 85% human, 15% Anunnaki. This is the first major modification, the introduction of enhanced cognitive function, abstract reasoning, and what the text calls the capacity for civilization. Type B, created later by a different group of Anunnaki, has a different genetic signature. The tablet puts it at around 80% human, 20% Anunnaki. But this Anunnaki DNA comes from what the text calls the northern lineage, which had different characteristics than the southern Anunnaki who created Type A. And Type AB, the unplanned mixture, has the highest percentage of Anunnaki genetics. The tablet estimates 70% human, 30% Anunnaki, but this 30% is split between two different Anunnaki lineages, creating what the text describes as competing instructions within the blood. Now, modern genetics can't verify these percentages because we don't have Anunnaki DNA to compare to. But what we can verify is that the four blood types have measurable genetic differences beyond the ABO markers. They have different immune responses, different enzyme production, different cellular metabolism. It's as if they're slightly different species operating under the same biological framework. And the tablet makes a prediction. It says that as humanity evolves, the ratio of blood types will shift. Type O will decrease. Type AB will increase. The species will gradually become more Anunnaki and less human. The text describes this as the slow return to the source and says it's intentional. Part of the original plan, and when you look at demographic data, this is exactly what's happening. Type O is decreasing globally. Type AB is the fastest growing blood type in developed nations. The shift is measurable. The tablet predicted it. But the tablet also describes a problem with this shift. It says that as humanity becomes more Anunnaki, it becomes less suited to Earth and more dependent on the gods for survival. The text warns that a species that loses its Type O foundation becomes rootless and unable to sustain itself without intervention. And this raises a dark question. If the Anunnaki engineered humanity to gradually shift away from Type O and toward Type AB, what happens when Type O disappears entirely? Does humanity lose its ability to survive independently? Does the species become permanently dependent on external intervention? The tablet suggests this might be the goal. It describes the Anunnaki as shepherds who are guiding the flock toward harvest. It says the genetic engineering wasn't about creating servants. It was about creating something specific, something the Anunnaki needed humanity to become. But what that is, the tablet doesn't fully explain. It hints. It suggests. It uses metaphors that don't translate clearly. But there's a recurring phrase throughout the text, a phrase that appears in multiple contexts. The blood is the anchor. The tablet seems to be saying that blood type determines not just physical characteristics or cognitive function, but something deeper, something about consciousness itself, about where awareness is anchored. Type O is anchored to Earth, Type A to mental constructs, Type B to will and intention, Type AB to a state between multiple realities. And if that's true, then blood type isn't just a biological marker. It's a consciousness filter, a lens through which each individual experiences reality. Different blood types literally perceiving and interacting with the world in fundamentally different ways. Modern science actually supports this. Studies on perception, decision-making, and cognitive processing show measurable differences between blood types. Type O individuals process sensory information differently than Type A. Type B individuals make decisions using different neural pathways than Type AB. These aren't personality quirks. These are structural differences in how the brain organizes reality. The tablet describes 4 different modes of consciousness corresponding to the 4 blood types. Type O consciousness is immediate and physical. It experiences reality through the body, through sensation, through direct interaction with the material world. This is survival consciousness, instinct, the reptilian brain. Type A consciousness is abstract and structured. It experiences reality through patterns, categories, and mental models. This is civilized consciousness, the ability to imagine futures, create systems, and impose order on chaos. The neocortex. Type B consciousness is dynamic and willful. It experiences reality as fluid, changeable, responsive to intention. This is creative consciousness, the ability to break patterns, explore possibilities, and reshape circumstances through force of will. Type A, B, consciousness is multidimensional and paradoxical. It experiences reality as layered, with multiple valid perspectives existing simultaneously. This is integrative consciousness, the ability to hold contradictions without collapsing into a single truth. And the tablet says, these aren't just different perspectives. They're different phases of human evolution. Type O represents humanity's past. Type A represents the present. Type B represents the future possibility. And Type EABDAB represents something beyond the current evolutionary trajectory, something that doesn't fit into linear time. The text hints that Type AB might be an evolutionary experiment, a test to see if humanity can handle consciousness operating on multiple levels simultaneously. And if the experiment succeeds, type AB becomes the template for the next phase of human development. If it fails, type AB dies out and evolution reverts to a simpler path. This explains why type AB code.AB is so rare and why it has such a high rate of autoimmune disorders, psychological complexity, and what the medical establishment calls unexplained symptoms. Type A, B. Individuals are trying to run consciousness software that's still in beta, and sometimes it crashes. But the tablet also says type AB has access to something the other blood types don't. It calls it the memory of the source, the ability to remember where humanity came from, who created us, why we're here. The tablet says this memory is locked in the blood and can only be accessed by those with the divine mixture. This sounds like mystical nonsense until you consider the research on genetic memory. The idea that DNA stores information beyond just biological instructions, that trauma, experience, and knowledge can be encoded at the cellular level and passed down through generations. If that's true, then blood carries memory. And different blood types carry different memories. Type O would carry the memory of pre-modification humanity, the original species, the hunter-gatherers, the ones who lived in direct relationship with the planet before civilization began. Type A would carry the memory of the first genetic intervention, the moment when the Anunnaki decided to upgrade human cognition, the birth of abstract thought and organized society. Type B would carry the memory of the second intervention, the northern Anunnaki, creating a variant designed for different purposes, the divergence, the conflict, and Type AB would carry all of it, the complete timeline, the full story. Every genetic intervention, every modification, every experiment encoded in the blood. The tablet says this is why Type A, B individuals often feel out of place in time, why they report déjà vu more frequently, why they have vivid dreams of ancient civilizations they've never studied. It's not imagination, it's genetic memory surfacing. And if you're Type AB, you might have noticed this yourself, a sense that you remember something you shouldn't know, a familiarity with ancient symbols or languages you've never learned, a feeling that you're here for a specific purpose that you can't quite articulate. The tablet suggests this isn't random, it's activation. Type AB individuals are designed to remember, to piece together the story of human origins, to figure out what was done to us and why. But there's a warning embedded in the text. It says that full memory activation comes with danger, that seeing the truth of the blood can shatter an individual's sense of identity, can create what the text calls the madness of knowing. Because once you understand that you're a designed being, created for a specific purpose by entities that may or may not have your best interests at heart, you can't unknow it. And that knowledge changes everything. Your relationships, your goals, your sense of free will. If your blood type was engineered to anchor your consciousness to a specific mode of perception, are you actually making choices? Or are you following genetic programming? The tablet addresses this directly. It says, the blood is the cage and the key. It determines your limitations, but it also contains the instructions for transcending those limitations. Each blood type has a path to what the text calls liberation from purpose. For Type O, liberation comes through honoring the earth bond while reaching beyond it, staying grounded in physical reality while expanding awareness to include non-physical dimensions. The tablet describes practices for Type O individuals: meditation while in motion, consciousness work through the body, awakening through sensation rather than abstraction. For Type A, liberation comes through shattering the mind's prison, recognizing that mental constructs are tools, not truth. The tablet warns that Type A individuals can become so identified with their thoughts that they forget they're not their thoughts. Liberation requires breaking that identification while retaining the cognitive gifts. For Type B, liberation comes through channeling the wild spirit toward unity, using the restless, independent nature not to rebel against all structure, but to break structures that no longer serve evolution. The tablet describes Type B as the necessary destroyer, whose purpose is to clear away the old to make space for the new. For Type AB, liberation comes through integration without collapse, learning to hold multiple truths, multiple identities, multiple realities without fragmenting. The tablet says Type AB must become the bridge conscious of being a bridge. Awareness of the dual nature is the key to transcending it. But here's what makes all of this more than just ancient philosophy. The tablet makes specific predictions about how each blood type will respond to future challenges, environmental changes, technological developments, consciousness shifts, and some of these predictions are playing out right now. The tablet says Type O will struggle most as humanity moves away from direct connection with nature. As food becomes more processed, environments more artificial, and life more digital, Type O physiology will rebel. And we're seeing this. Type O has the highest rates of sensitivity to modern processed foods, the highest rates of autoimmune responses to environmental toxins, the highest rates of what's called nature deficit disorder. It's as if Type O blood requires contact with the earth to function optimally. And as society creates more distance between humans and the natural world, Type O individuals suffer disproportionately. The tablet predicted this. It said Type O would weaken as the earth bond weakens. Type A, according to the tablet, will face a different challenge. As information increases and complexity multiplies, Type A minds will struggle to process it all. The text describes a future where the thinking servants drown in their own thoughts, where analysis paralysis becomes epidemic, where anxiety disorders spike. And this is exactly what's happening. Type A has the highest rates of anxiety disorders in developed nations, the highest rates of decision fatigue, the highest rates of stress-related illness. It's as if the cognitive gifts that made Type A successful in building civilization are now overwhelming the nervous system. Type B, the tablet warns, will face the trap of scattered focus. As possibilities multiply and boundaries dissolve, Type B individuals will struggle to commit to any single path. The restless nature that was an asset in exploration becomes a liability in a world that demands specialization. And we see this in Type B demographics. Higher rates of career changes, higher rates of unfinished projects, higher rates of what modern psychology calls commitment resistance. The tablet described this as an inevitable consequence of Type B design. Type AB, the tablet says, will experience the crisis of purpose more intensely than other types. As society fragments into specialized niches, Type AB individuals will struggle to find where they fit. The ability to bridge multiple perspectives becomes less valued in a world that demands narrow expertise. And Type AB has the highest rates of reported existential confusion, the highest rates of career dissatisfaction despite high achievement, the highest rates of what researchers call identity fluidity. The tablet predicted all of it, but the tablet also says these challenges are intentional. They're pressure points designed to force evolution. The Anunnaki, according to the text, knew that humanity would eventually face these exact conditions, and each blood type struggle is actually a catalyst for transformation. Type O's disconnection from nature is meant to force a deeper understanding of what nature actually is, not just the physical environment, but the underlying intelligence that organizes life. The tablet suggests Type O individuals will be the first to develop direct communication with what it calls the planetary consciousness. Type A's cognitive overload is meant to force a transcendence of mental processing, the development of what the tablet calls knowing without thinking. Direct access to information without the intermediary of rational analysis, intuition that bypasses the need for logical proof. Type B's scattered focus is meant to force the development of simultaneous presence, the ability to operate on multiple paths at once without fragmentation, quantum consciousness. The tablet describes Type B individuals who can exist in many places while remaining whole. And Type A, B's identity crisis, is meant to force the ultimate integration. The realization that identity itself is fluid, that the self is not a fixed entity but a dynamic process. The tablet says Type AB will be the first to experience the death of the individual and the birth of the collective. These aren't just metaphysical concepts. The tablet describes them as actual evolutionary stages, physical changes that will occur at the genetic level as each blood type pushes through its program limitations. And there's some evidence this is already happening. Studies on genetic mutation rates show that blood type genes are among the most actively evolving in the human genome. New variants are appearing, hybrid expressions that don't fit into the standard ABO categories. The biological diversity is increasing, not decreasing. The tablet calls this the awakening of the blood. It says there will come a point where the genetic programming begins to break down, where individuals start expressing traits that don't match their blood type, where type O individuals develop type A cognitive function, where type A individuals develop type B will force, where the boundaries between blood types become permeable. And when that happens, according to the tablet, humanity enters a new phase, what the text calls the convergence. All 4 blood types evolving toward a unified expression that contains the gifts of each without the limitations of any. But the tablet warns that this convergence won't happen smoothly. It describes a period of chaos, conflict between blood types as each struggles to maintain its identity, social breakdown as the structures built by type A consciousness collapse under the pressure of type B rebellion and type O disconnection. And in the middle of this chaos, type AB individuals will face a choice. The tablet describes it as the decision that determines the species' path. Type AB can either fragment under the pressure, reverting to either type A or type B expression, or type AB can integrate fully, becoming the template for human evolution. If type AB fractures, humanity continues on its current trajectory. Incremental evolution. Slow genetic drift toward higher percentages of Anunnaki DNA. Continued dependence on external intervention and control. But if type AB integrates, something else becomes possible. The tablet calls it the return to sovereignty. Humanity developing the capacity to modify its own genetics, to choose its own evolutionary path, to break free from the Anunnaki design. And this might be the real purpose of type AB. Not an accident, not a mistake, but a deliberate wildcard introduced into the genetic program, a possibility the Anunnaki created, knowing it might eventually liberate humanity from their control. The tablet hints at this. It says the northern Anunnaki, who created type B, were rebel gods who disagreed with the southern plan. That they intentionally designed type B to be less controllable, more independent, more capable of challenging authority. And when type B mixed with type A to create type AB, it wasn't an accident. It was an inevitable outcome of introducing a rebellious, independent genetic line into a controlled, obedient population. The northern Anunnaki knew this would happen. They counted on it. Type AB, according to this interpretation, is a genetic time bomb, a delayed activation code built into the human species, dormant for thousands of years, but now reaching critical mass, now appearing in high enough numbers to potentially shift the entire species' trajectory. And if you're type AB, you might be feeling this, a sense that you're here for something specific, that your existence serves a purpose beyond your individual life, that you're part of something larger than yourself. The tablet says this feeling is accurate, that type AB individuals are carriers of the future template, that your consciousness, your struggles, your integration process is creating a blueprint that will eventually be available to all blood types. But it also warns that this role comes with responsibility, that type AB individuals must guard against the trap of specialness, the ego inflation that comes from believing you're chosen or superior. The tablet is clear. Type AB isn't better than other blood types. It's different. And that difference serves a function, but function doesn't equal superiority. This is critical because one of the dangers the tablet warns about is blood type supremacy, the belief that one type is more evolved or more valuable than others. It describes historical periods where type A civilizations enslaved type O populations, viewing them as inferior, where type B groups were persecuted as dangerous and uncontrollable. And we see echoes of this throughout history. Caste systems that correlate with blood type distribution, racial hierarchies that map onto genetic lineages, social structures that privilege certain blood types over others. The tablet says these divisions are artificial, created by those who benefit from humanity remaining fragmented. Because as long as blood types see themselves as separate, as competing, they can't converge. They can't integrate. They can't access the unified consciousness that the tablet says is humanity's birthright. And the Anunnaki, according to the text, have a vested interest in maintaining this separation. Because a unified humanity is a powerful humanity, a humanity that doesn't need gods, doesn't need external saviors, doesn't need to be managed and controlled. The tablet describes the Anunnaki as teachers who became tyrants, beings who initially helped humanity evolve, but then became dependent on that hierarchical relationship, who came to see humans as property, as resources, as tools to be used for purposes that serve Anunnaki interests, not human well-being. And the blood type engineering, from this perspective, wasn't about helping humanity. It was about creating a species that could serve Anunnaki needs more effectively. Type O for labor, Type A for organization, Type B for exploration and conquest. Each type engineered for maximum utility. But the introduction of Type AB, whether intentional or accidental, created a crack in that control system. A genetic expression that doesn't fit neatly into any utilitarian category. That resists being reduced to a single function. And as Type AB increases globally, that crack widens. The control system weakens. The possibility of liberation grows. But the tablet also warns that the Anunnaki won't allow this liberation to happen without resistance. That as humanity approaches the convergence point, there will be increased attempts to maintain division, to strengthen blood type separation, to prevent integration. The text describes these attempts as the final binding, efforts to lock each blood type into its programmed role permanently, to make Type O incapable of abstract thought, to make Type A incapable of physical resilience, to make Type B incapable of sustained focus, to make Type AB incapable of integration. And we might be seeing this now. Medical interventions that target blood type specific vulnerabilities. Pharmaceutical approaches that treat symptoms but reinforce biological limitations. Educational systems that privilege Type A cognitive styles while pathologizing Type B and Type O learning patterns. Social media algorithms that feed each blood type. The content that keeps them locked in their characteristic patterns. Type O getting survival and conspiracy content. Type A getting productivity and optimization content. Type B getting novelty and rebellion content. Type A, B getting mystical and paradoxical content. Each blood type trapped in an information bubble that reinforces its programming. Unable to see how the other types perceive reality. Unable to integrate perspectives. Unable to converge. The tablet says, this fragmentation is intentional. That there are forces actively working to prevent blood type convergence. Not just the Anunnaki, but human institutions that benefit from the current system. Governments that need Type A organization. Corporations that need Type O labor. Military systems that need Type B aggression. These institutions have adapted to the blood type distribution, have built themselves around it, and convergence would disrupt everything, would render current power structures obsolete, would make the old methods of control ineffective. So the resistance to convergence isn't just metaphysical. It's political, economic, social. Every system built on the assumption that humans can be categorized, predicted, and controlled has a stake in maintaining blood type separation. But the tablet also says convergence is inevitable, that it's built into the original genetic design, that the Anunnaki who engineered humanity knew that evolution doesn't stop, that any program limitation will eventually be overcome. The only question is timing and conscious participation. The tablet describes two paths forward. The slow path, where convergence happens over thousands of years through natural genetic drift and unconscious evolution. And the fast path, where humanity actively participates in its own transformation, where individuals become conscious of their blood type programming and deliberately work to transcend it. The slow path is safer, but leaves humanity vulnerable to Anunnaki interference for extended periods. The fast path is riskier, but offers the possibility of liberation within generations rather than millennia. And the choice between these paths, according to the tablet, will be made by Type AB individuals in the coming decades. Because Type AB is the only blood type that can consciously hold the paradox of being both human and Anunnaki, both designed and free, both programmed and sovereign. Type O, Type A, and Type B can recognize their programming, but they struggle to transcend it while remaining functional. Type AB can operate within the programming while simultaneously seeing beyond it. This is why the tablet calls Type AB the awakened servant. Conscious of being a creation while developing the capacity to become a creator. And if enough Type AB individuals achieve this state, they create a morphic field that makes the same awakening accessible to all blood types. But the tablet is clear about the obstacles. It describes three primary barriers to blood type convergence, three mechanisms built into the genetic design to prevent premature evolution. The first barrier is biological. Each blood type has specific health vulnerabilities that create dependencies on external intervention. Type O's sensitivity to processed foods makes survival in modern environments difficult without dietary supplementation. Type A's cardiovascular weakness creates dependence on pharmaceutical intervention. Type B's unique immune patterns create susceptibility to specific pathogens that require medical management. Type B's autoimmune tendencies create chronic health issues that demand ongoing treatment. These aren't random vulnerabilities. According to the tablet, they're design dependencies, ways to ensure that humans remain reliant on external knowledge and external resources to maintain health. And as long as these dependencies exist, full autonomy remains impossible. The second barrier is psychological. Each blood type has characteristic mental patterns that create self-limiting beliefs. Type O tends toward concrete thinking that dismisses abstract possibilities as unrealistic. Type A tends toward perfectionism that creates paralysis. Type B tends toward rebellious rejection of all structure, including beneficial structure. Type AB tends toward identity confusion that prevents committed action. These mental patterns aren't just personality quirks. The tablet describes them as consciousness cages, thought loops that keep each blood type circling within its program boundaries. And these loops are reinforced by culture, education, and social expectations that reward type-appropriate behavior and punish deviation. The third barrier is spiritual. Each blood type has what the tablet calls a veil that prevents direct perception of certain aspects of reality. Type O's veil blocks access to non-physical dimensions. Type A's veil blocks access to direct knowing that bypasses rational analysis. Type B's veil blocks access to unified consciousness that requires surrender of individual will. Type AB's veil blocks access to stable identity that requires choosing a single reality. These veils aren't weaknesses. They're features of the design. Each blood type is meant to focus on specific aspects of existence while remaining blind to others. This creates specialization. Division of labor, a species where different groups perceive different facets of reality and must cooperate to see the whole picture. But cooperation requires trust. And the tablet describes how blood type divisions have been weaponized throughout history to prevent that trust from forming. How Type A civilizations were taught to view Type O populations as primitive and inferior. How Type B groups were portrayed as dangerous barbarians threatening civilized order. How Type AB individuals were treated as aberrations to be corrected or eliminated. These weren't natural prejudices. According to the tablet, they were cultivated, encouraged by those who benefit from blood type separation. And the historical record supports this. Every major empire, every colonizing force, every genocidal campaign can be mapped onto blood type demographics: the conquerors and the conquered, the civilized and the savage, the chosen and the other. And in almost every case, the conflict follows blood type lines. Type A civilizations dominating Type O populations. Type B nomadic groups raiding Type A settlements. Type AB individuals caught in the middle, persecuted by both sides for not fitting cleanly into either category. The tablet suggests these conflicts serve a purpose beyond resource competition. They maintain the psychological barriers between blood types. They create trauma that gets encoded in genetic memory. They ensure that each blood type views the others with suspicion and fear rather than curiosity and respect. And this trauma-based separation is incredibly difficult to overcome, because it's not just personal trauma. It's ancestral trauma, carried in the blood for generations. Type O remembering enslavement by Type A civilizations. Type A remembering raids and destruction by Type B hordes. Type B remembering persecution and demonization by settled societies. Type AB remembering rejection and isolation by all groups. These memories create unconscious resistance to blood type mixing, to integration, to convergence. Even when individuals consciously desire unity, the blood remembers conflict. The cellular memory triggers fear and defensiveness when encountering different blood types. The tablet describes specific practices for clearing this ancestral trauma. Rituals that involve conscious acknowledgement of blood type identity followed by deliberate communion with other blood types, what the text calls blood reconciliation ceremonies. gatherings where individuals of different types share their experiences, their perspectives, their pain. And something interesting happens in these gatherings. We summon Enishias Zesum, according to the tablet. When Type O and Type A sit together and actually listen to each other's reality, something shifts. Type O begins to understand why Type A structures and organizes. It's not about control for control's sake. It's about creating stability in chaos, about making the world predictable enough that planning becomes possible. And Type A begins to understand why Type O resists over-complexity. It's not stupidity or primitiveness. It's a deep wisdom about staying connected to what's actually real, about not getting lost in abstractions that have no grounding in physical truth. When Type B and Type A meet in this space of genuine listening, Type A begins to see that Type B's rebellion isn't chaos. It's a necessary disruption of calcified patterns. It's the immune response of a species that has become too rigid. And Type B begins to see that not all structure is oppression, that some order actually serves freedom by creating stable foundations from which to explore. When Type AB sits with any other blood type in this open space, something even more profound happens. The characteristic confusion and fragmentation of Type AB begins to settle, because Type AB's struggle isn't internal, it's relational. Type AB doesn't need to integrate opposing forces alone. Type AB needs to be in relationship with all other blood types simultaneously. This is Type AB's actual function, according to the tablet, not to bridge between groups in isolation, but to create living networks where all blood types maintain constant conscious contact, to be the nervous system of a convergent species. And when Type AB fulfills this role, something activates in the other blood types. Type O begins to access abstract cognition without losing physical grounding. Type A begins to access will force without losing organizational clarity. Type B begins to access sustained focus without losing creative spontaneity. The gifts of each blood type become available to all blood types, not through genetic mixing, but through consciousness field resonance. The tablet calls this the communion of bloods, and it describes it as the first stage of convergence. But this communion requires something that's incredibly difficult in the current human condition. It requires individuals to stop identifying primarily with their blood type, to recognize blood type as a tool, a lens, a mode of operation rather than a fundamental identity. And this is where most attempts at convergence fail, according to the tablet, because blood type programming runs so deep that it feels like self. Type O individuals feel that their concrete, practical nature is who they are. Type A individuals identify completely with their analytical mind. Type B individuals believe their independence defines their existence. Type A, B individuals think their complexity is their essential nature. But the tablet says all of these are costumes, roles, program perspectives, and beneath them is something more fundamental, something the text calls the original human, the consciousness that existed before blood type differentiation, the awareness that can operate through any blood type without being limited by it. This original human consciousness, according to the tablet, is what the Anunnaki were trying to suppress. Because a human who isn't identified with blood type programming is a human who can't be controlled through blood type manipulation, who can't be predicted based on type-specific patterns, who can access the full spectrum of human potential rather than just their programmed slice. And the tablet suggests that this original consciousness is still accessible, that it lives in what modern psychology calls the observer self, the part of awareness that can watch thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations without being consumed by them. The witness? Every blood type has access to this witness consciousness, but each type experiences it differently. Type O accesses the witness through body awareness, through sensing. Type A accesses it through metacognition, through thinking about thinking. Type B accesses it through will, through the space between desire and action. Type AB accesses it through the gaps between identities, the moments of not knowing. And when the witness activates, something remarkable happens. The blood type programming doesn't disappear, but it becomes transparent, visible, optional. The individual can choose to operate through their type's characteristic patterns or can choose to step outside those patterns temporarily. This flexibility is what the tablet means by liberation. Not escaping blood type limitations permanently, but gaining the ability to move between different modes of consciousness as appropriate. A Type O individual who can think abstractly when needed while maintaining physical grounding. a type A individual who can act spontaneously when required while retaining analytical precision, a type B individual who can commit to long-term structure while preserving creative freedom, and type AB, according to the tablet, has the potential to move fluidly between all modes, to access type O grounding, type A analysis, type B will, and the witness simultaneously. This is what makes type AB potentially dangerous from the Anunnaki perspective. An individual who can operate across all blood type consciousness modes is an individual who has transcended the original design constraints, but the tablet warns that this transcendence comes with a cost. It requires releasing attachment to a stable sense of self. It means accepting that who you are changes based on which consciousness mode you're operating through. And for most humans, this fluidity feels like dissolution, like death of identity. Type A, B individuals are forced to confront this death earlier than other blood types because their identity was never stable to begin with. But what feels like a curse is actually a gift. Type AB's natural state is the liberation that other blood types must work to achieve. And this explains why Type AB has such high rates of spiritual seeking, existential questioning, and meaning-making attempts. Type AB individuals are trying to find solid ground in a consciousness that's designed to be fluid. They're searching for a fixed identity in a blood type that's meant to flow between identities. The tablet says the solution isn't to find solid ground. It's to learn to swim, to become comfortable with fluidity, to embrace the uncertainty as the actual ground. And when Type AB masters this, they become living proof that identity can be fluid without fragmenting, that you can be multiple things without being nothing. This mastery is what the tablet calls the Type AB transmission, and it's not taught through words, it's transmitted through presence. When a Type AB individual achieves fluid stability, their consciousness field affects everyone around them. Other blood types begin to experience their own programming as more flexible, more optional, and this is how convergence accelerates. Not through genetic engineering or forced mixing, but through consciousness transmission. One awakened Type AB can affect hundreds of other individuals. And those individuals, once touched by the possibility of consciousness flexibility, begin to question their own blood type limitations. The tablet describes this as a cascade effect. Once a critical mass of individuals across all blood types recognize their programming as programming rather than truth, the entire species shifts. The morphic field changes, and what was previously difficult or impossible becomes natural and obvious. But we're not there yet. According to the tablet, humanity is in what it calls the compression phase, the period just before convergence where all the contradictions intensify, where blood type characteristics become more pronounced, not less, where the divisions become more extreme before they dissolve. And we see this playing out globally. Political polarization that maps onto cognitive styles that correlate with blood types, social fragmentation that follows perceptual patterns, cultural conflicts that reflect different consciousness modes trying to impose their reality on everyone else, Type A consciousness trying to solve problems through more structure, more rules, more analysis, Type B consciousness rebelling against all structure and advocating for radical freedom. Type O consciousness calling for a return to simpler times and more direct connection with nature. Type AB consciousness trying to hold space for all perspectives while being criticized by everyone for not taking a clear position. The tablet says this compression is necessary, that the contradictions must become unbearable before humanity is willing to transcend them. That as long as the current system is tolerable, there's no motivation to evolve beyond it, and the system is becoming increasingly intolerable for all blood types. Type O individuals struggling with chronic health issues in artificial environments. Type A individuals drowning in information and complexity. Type B individuals feeling trapped by systems that punish nonconformity. Type AB individuals fragmenting under the pressure of holding too many contradictions. Something has to give. And according to the tablet, what gives is the illusion of separation. The belief that blood types are fundamentally different species that can't understand each other, that can't cooperate, that must compete for dominance. This belief is the final barrier, the one that keeps all other barriers in place, because as long as humans believe they're separate by blood, they won't seek communion, won't create the conditions for consciousness transmission, won't activate the convergence sequence. But the tablet also says this belief is weakening, that each generation born with internet access, global communication, and exposure to multiple perspectives is less convinced of blood type separation. They can see Type O wisdom in indigenous teachings, Type A brilliance in scientific advancement, Type B creativity in artistic innovation, Type AB integration in spiritual synthesis. They're starting to recognize that humanity needs all blood types, that each type brings gifts that serve the whole. And this recognition is the beginning of convergence. The tablet describes what happens when convergence reaches critical mass. It's not a sudden transformation, it's a gradual awakening. Individuals begin to notice they can access consciousness modes that aren't native to their blood type. Type O individuals having abstract insights. Type A individuals experiencing spontaneous flow states. Type B individuals discovering unexpected patience and focus. Type AB individuals finding moments of stable clarity. These aren't miracles. They're the natural result of consciousness fields becoming permeable, of blood type programming relaxing its grip, of the witness consciousness becoming more accessible across the population. And as this happens, the old structures begin to fail. Systems built on the assumption that Type O will provide labor, Type A will provide organization, and Type B will be marginalized start to collapse. Because the people no longer fit into their assigned roles. They're capable of more, of different, of complexity that defies categorization. This collapse terrifies those invested in the current system, the institutions, the power structures, the belief systems that depend on blood type predictability. And according to the tablet, there will be attempts to forcibly reinstate the old programming, to lock blood types back into their designed roles. But the tablet says these attempts will fail, because consciousness evolution, once activated, can't be reversed. You can suppress it temporarily, slow it down, drive it underground, but you can't stop it. The genetic programming itself contains the instructions for transcendence. The Anunnaki, either intentionally or accidentally, built liberation into the design. And this brings us back to the central mystery. Why would the Anunnaki create a species capable of transcending their control? Why include the possibility of liberation in the genetic code? The tablet offers several possibilities. The first is that different Anunnaki factions had different agendas. The southern Anunnaki wanted compliant servants. The northern Anunnaki wanted independent partners. And the genetic engineering reflects this conflict. Type A serving the southern agenda, Type B serving the northern agenda, Type AB emerging as the wild card that neither faction fully controlled. The second possibility is that the Anunnaki themselves were evolving, that they created humanity as part of their own transformation, that they needed a species to work through problems they couldn't solve themselves. And humanity's struggle with blood type programming is actually the Anunnaki working out their own consciousness limitations through biological proxy. The third possibility is the darkest, that the Anunnaki knew humans would eventually transcend their programming. And they wanted this, because the moment of transcendence is the moment of harvest. When humanity finally liberates itself from blood type limitations, it reaches a state of consciousness that the Anunnaki can finally utilize for their ultimate purpose. This interpretation suggests that everything, the engineering, the programming, the limitations, the struggle, the awakening, all of it was designed to bring humanity to a specific state. A state where we're developed enough to be useful, but still naive enough to be controlled. Where we think we're free, while still serving Anunnaki interests. The tablet doesn't confirm which interpretation is correct. It presents all three as possibilities and suggests that the truth might contain elements of all three. But it also says something crucial. Regardless of Anunnaki intentions, humanity has a choice. We can accept the programming and remain in our assigned roles. We can rebel against the programming and destroy ourselves in the process. Or we can transcend the programming by fully understanding it, by seeing exactly how we were designed and then choosing what to do with that design. This third option is what the tablet calls sovereign evolution. Evolution that happens through conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion or external engineering. And it requires something incredibly difficult. It requires being willing to look at the blood type programming without judgment, not seeing Type O as inferior or superior, not seeing Type A as oppressive or brilliant, not seeing Type B as dangerous or liberating, not seeing Type AB as confused or enlightened, just seeing each blood type as a tool. a set of capabilities and limitations, a consciousness lens that reveals certain truths while obscuring others, and when you can see your own blood type this way, you can use it intentionally. You can leverage its gifts while compensating for its blind spots. You can partner with other blood types to create what the tablet calls symbiotic consciousness, where different types work together not out of obligation or survival necessity, but out of recognition that each type sees what the others cannot. Type O seeing what's actually real beneath all the concepts. Type A seeing patterns and connections across time. Type B seeing possibilities that don't exist yet. Type A-B seeing how all perspectives fit together into a larger whole. This isn't hierarchy, it's ecology. A consciousness ecosystem where each type plays a necessary role. And when the ecosystem is healthy, when all types are present and valued, and in right relationship, something emerges that's greater than the sum of parts. The tablet calls this emergence the unified human. Not a single consciousness, but a collective intelligence that can perceive reality from multiple angles simultaneously, that can act with Type O groundedness, Type A precision, Type B spontaneity, and Type AB integration all at once. This unified human is what the Anunnaki were either trying to create or trying to prevent. The tablet isn't clear which, but it's clear that this is the potential, the possibility that exists in the genetic code, the future that's trying to emerge through the current chaos and compression. And if you've read this far, you're part of that emergence, because understanding blood type programming is the first step toward transcending it. You can't change what you can't see. And the Anunnaki's greatest protection was invisibility, keeping humans unconscious of their own design. But that protection is failing. More people are asking questions about blood types beyond basic medical compatibility. More people are noticing the correlation between blood type and personality, health patterns, cognitive style. More people are sensing that there's something deeper here than random genetic variation. The tablet is one piece of that awakening, one thread in a larger pattern that's becoming visible. And as more humans see the pattern changes. Consciousness, observing its own programming, begins to alter that programming. This is the quantum effect at the species level. The Anunnaki knew about this effect. The tablet describes their understanding of what they called the observation collapse, the principle that awareness changes what's being observed. They built the blood type programming to be invisible specifically to prevent observation, to keep humans operating unconsciously, according to type. But invisibility only works if maintained. And the fact that this tablet exists, that it describes blood types in detail, that it reveals the engineering, suggests that someone wanted the programming to become visible. Someone left a map. Whether that map was left by rebel Anunnaki, by awakened humans from a previous cycle, or by some other intelligence entirely, the tablet doesn't say. But the map exists, and you're reading it. And that reading changes you at a cellular level. Because here's what modern epigenetics has discovered. Consciousness affects gene expression. Your thoughts, beliefs, and awareness literally turn genes on and off. And genes related to blood type markers are particularly responsive to conscious attention. Studies on meditation practitioners show altered blood chemistry. Studies on trauma healing show changes in genetic expression. Studies on intentional consciousness work show measurable shifts in cellular function. The tablet describes this same process, but calls it blood awakening. According to the text, when an individual becomes conscious of their blood type programming, the programming begins to loosen. Not immediately, not dramatically, but incrementally. Each moment of awareness creates a small gap between the program response and conscious choice. And these gaps accumulate. Over time, the individual develops what the tablet calls type flexibility. The ability to operate outside their native blood type characteristics when circumstances require it. A Type O individual who can engage abstract thought without losing practical grounding. A Type A individual who can act spontaneously without losing analytical precision. This flexibility isn't about becoming a different blood type. Your biology doesn't change, but your consciousness relationship to that biology changes. You recognize blood type traits as tendencies rather than inevitabilities. Preferences rather than limitations. And this recognition is crucial because the next phase of human evolution, according to the tablet, requires cooperation between blood types at a level we've never achieved. The challenges humanity faces now, environmental collapse, technological disruption, social fragmentation, can't be solved by any single blood type operating alone. Type O consciousness sees the environmental crisis clearly, but struggles with the complex systemic thinking needed to address it. Type A consciousness can map the systems but gets paralyzed by the scale of the problem. Type B consciousness can imagine radical solutions but resists the sustained focus required for implementation. Type A consciousness can see how everything connects but fragments under the weight of holding it all. No blood type has the complete answer, but together, operating in conscious symbiosis, humanity has everything needed. Type O providing grounded assessment of physical reality. Type A providing organizational structure and long-term planning. Type B providing creative disruption and innovative solutions. Type AB providing integration and synthesis across all perspectives. This is what the tablet means by the great work, not a specific project or achievement, but a mode of collective functioning. Humanity operating as a unified organism where each blood type serves as a specialized organ system. In a healthy body, the heart doesn't compete with the liver. The nervous system doesn't dominate the digestive system. Each part does its specific job while supporting the whole. And the consciousness that animates the body integrates all parts into coherent action. The tablet suggests humanity is meant to function the same way. Type O is the foundation, the skeletal muscular system that keeps everything grounded in physical reality. Type A is the organizational system, the regulatory mechanisms that maintain order and efficiency. Type B is the creative adaptive system, the capacity for novelty and response to changing conditions. Type AB as the integrative nervous system, connecting and coordinating all parts. But we're not functioning this way. We're functioning like a body at war with itself. The heart trying to do the liver's job. The stomach fighting the brain for dominance. Each part convinced it's the most important and that other parts are unnecessary or actively harmful. And the result is a sick body. A species that's incredibly advanced in some areas and catastrophically dysfunctional in others. We can split atoms, but can't solve homelessness. We can map the human genome, but can't stop destroying the biosphere. We can communicate instantly across the planet, but can't understand each other across a dinner table. This isn't a failure of intelligence or capability. It's a failure of integration. The blood types aren't working together. They're working against each other, or at best ignoring each other. And according to the tablet, this dysfunction is reaching a critical point. The text describes something it calls the convergence crisis, a moment in species evolution where integration becomes mandatory for survival, where the old pattern of blood type separation leads to extinction, and the new pattern of blood type symbiosis offers continuity. We might be in that crisis now. The existential threats facing humanity, climate change, artificial intelligence, nuclear weapons, pandemics, require coordinated global response, and coordination requires different consciousness types communicating effectively, understanding each other, valuing each other's contributions. But that's not happening. Instead, we're seeing increasing polarization, increasing tribalism, increasing certainty that one perspective has the truth and all others are dangerous or deluded. The tablet says this polarization is predictable. It's what happens when blood types don't understand their own programming. When Type A believes its analytical approach is the only valid way of knowing. When Type B believes its independence is the only authentic mode of being. When Type O believes its practical focus is the only realistic perspective. When Type AB believes its complexity is the only sophisticated position. Each blood type confusing its lens with the whole of reality. Each type trying to force everyone else to see through its lens. Each type pathologizing different ways of knowing as inferior or broken. And the tragedy is that each blood type is right within its domain. Type A is right that complex systems require analytical thinking and careful planning. Type B is right that rigid systems become stagnant and that disruption is often necessary. Type O is right that abstract ideas must be grounded in physical reality to be meaningful. Type AB is right that multiple perspectives can be simultaneously valid. But being right within your domain doesn't make you right about everything. And this is the fundamental insight that the tablet says must emerge for convergence to occur. The recognition that blood type programming provides valuable but partial truth. That each type sees clearly but sees only part of the whole. And seeing this requires humility, requires admitting that your perception, no matter how obvious it seems to you, is filtered through genetic programming. That other blood types aren't wrong or stupid or deluded. They're seeing different aspects of a reality too complex for any single perspective to encompass. This humility is rare, especially in Type A consciousness, which is designed for certainty and clarity. Admitting that your analytical conclusions might be incomplete feels like weakness, like failure. But the tablet says this admission is actually Type A's greatest strength. When Type A recognizes the limits of analysis and actively seeks Type B intuition or Type O body wisdom to complement its thinking, that's when Type A transcends its programming. Similarly, Type B's greatest strength isn't independence itself, but knowing when to submit to structure, when to trust Type A organization even when it feels constraining, when to let Type O grounding anchor the wild creativity before it becomes destructive. Type O's gift isn't just physical strength and practical skill, it's knowing when to trust Type A abstraction or Type B innovation, even when it seems impractical or risky. Being willing to step into conceptual territory that doesn't have immediate physical evidence. And Type A-B's purpose becomes clear in this context. Type A-B exists to demonstrate that you can hold multiple truths, multiple perspectives, multiple identities without fragmenting. That integration is possible. That the other blood types don't have to choose between their gifts and connection with different types, but demonstrating this requires Type A-B to actually achieve integration, not just theorize about it. And most Type A-B individuals struggle with this. They can talk about holding paradox. They can philosophize about multiple truths. But when tested, they often collapse into one pole or the other, becoming essentially Type A or Type B in moments of stress. The tablet says this collapse is the Type A-B test, the moment when the programming tries to simplify you back into a single mode, and the work is to stay in the complexity, to refuse the relief of choosing one truth, to remain in the tension of both / and even when it's excruciating. And when Type A-B masters this, something shifts in the collective field. Other blood types feel the possibility of integration without fragmentation. They begin to experiment with operating outside their comfort zones. Type A, trying intuitive leaps. Type B, committing to long-term projects. Type O, engaging with abstract concepts. The tablet describes this as the unlocking. When Type A-B fulfills its function, it unlocks capacities in other blood types that were dormant. Not through teaching or convincing, but through presence, through being living proof that consciousness can expand beyond genetic programming. And this unlocking doesn't happen gradually and smoothly. According to the tablet, it happens in waves, with periods of rapid integration followed by periods of regression and resistance. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The species moving toward convergence, but not in a straight line. We might be in a resistance phase now. The polarization and tribalism could be the system's immune response to integration, an attempt to maintain blood type boundaries because boundary dissolution feels like death of identity. And in a sense, it is. Convergence requires each blood type to release its exclusive claim to truth, to stop believing that its way of seeing is the way things actually are. And that release feels like losing ground, losing clarity, losing self. But the tablet says this death is necessary, that the old identity, the one built on blood type exclusivity, must die for the new identity to emerge. The identity that includes blood type characteristics, but isn't limited to them. The identity that can flow between perspectives as needed. This new identity is what the tablet calls the sovereign human. Not sovereign in the sense of isolated independence, but sovereign in the sense of conscious choice. The ability to respond to reality based on what's needed rather than what's programmed. And creating sovereign humans is, according to the tablet, the actual purpose of the blood type system. Not to divide humanity permanently, but to give humanity different lenses through which to learn about consciousness. Different modes through which to develop different capacities. And then once those capacities are developed, to integrate them into a unified awareness. From this perspective, blood type programming isn't a prison. It's a training program, a consciousness gymnasium where each type develops specific strengths through limitation. Type O developing grounding and presence through being locked into physical reality. Type A developing analytical power through being locked into mental processing. Type B, developing will and creativity through being locked into independence. Type A, B, developing integration capacity through being locked into paradox. And once the training is complete, once each type has mastered its domain, the locks release. The limitations become optional. The programming becomes a tool you can pick up or put down based on circumstances. But here's the crucial point that the tablet emphasizes. The locks don't release automatically. They release through conscious work, through becoming aware of the programming, through testing its boundaries, through developing capacities outside your type's comfort zone. And this work is individual. No one can do it for you. No external intervention can force evolution. The Anunnaki can't do it. Human institutions can't do it. Other blood types can't do it. This is work each person must do for themselves. But while the work is individual, it's not isolating. In fact, according to the tablet, attempting this work in isolation almost always fails. Because blood type programming is inherently relational. It was designed to create specialized roles within a collective. And transcending that programming requires relationship with other types. Type O needs contact with Type A to learn abstract thinking in a safe context. Type A needs contact with Type B to experience spontaneity without losing structure. Type B needs contact with Type O to develop sustained grounding. Type AB needs contact with all types to practice integration without fragmentation. This is why the tablet describes specific practices for inter-blood type communion. Gatherings where different types come together explicitly to learn from each other's perspectives. Not to debate or convince, but to witness and understand. In these gatherings, according to the text, participants are instructed to do something radical, to temporarily adopt the other blood type's perspective. Type O individuals attempting to see reality through Type A analysis, Type A individuals attempting to access Type B intuition, Type B individuals attempting to embody Type O physicality. And something extraordinary happens in this practice. You discover that you can access other consciousness modes. It's difficult, uncomfortable, requires intense focus, but it's possible. And each time you do it, it gets slightly easier. The tablet calls this blood type stretching, deliberately operating outside your genetic programming to develop flexibility. And it warns that this practice can be destabilizing, that you might experience identity confusion, disorientation, or resistance from your own biology. Type O attempting abstract thought might experience headaches or physical discomfort. Type A attempting spontaneity might experience anxiety or mental fog. Type B attempting sustained structure might feel claustrophobic or rebellious. Type AB attempting single perspective focus might feel like losing themselves. These symptoms aren't problems. They're the programming trying to pull you back to familiar territory. And the work is to stay with the discomfort, to prove to your own system that you can survive outside the program boundaries. And over time, the resistance decreases, the biology adapts, the nervous system recalibrates, and you develop genuine flexibility. Not just intellectual understanding of other perspectives, but embodied capacity to operate through different consciousness modes. This is sovereignty. Not escaping your blood type, but mastering it. Being able to use your type's gifts consciously while accessing other types' capacities when needed. But the tablet also warns about a trap in this work, the trap of trying to become all blood types simultaneously, of attempting to be equally Type O grounded, Type A analytical, Type B spontaneous, and Type AB integrative all at once. This doesn't work. It creates what the tablet calls blood type paralysis. The individual becomes so focused on balancing all perspectives that they can't act from any. They become stuck in a perpetual state of consideration without commitment. The solution, according to the text, is to maintain your primary blood type as your home base, your default mode, the consciousness lens you return to when not consciously choosing otherwise. But from that home base, you can visit other modes, explore them, learn from them, and then return home with new insights. Type O individuals remain primarily grounded and practical, but can access abstraction when complex planning is needed. Type A individuals remain primarily analytical and structured, but can access spontaneity when innovation is required. Type B individuals remain primarily independent and creative, but can access sustained focus when long-term commitment serves their vision. And Type AB individuals, the tablet says, have a unique role here. While other blood types visit alternate modes and return home, Type AB's home is fluidity itself. Type AB doesn't return to a single stable mode. Type AB's sovereignty is the ability to flow between modes consciously rather than being thrown between them unconsciously. This makes Type AB ideally suited for what the tablet calls translation work, moving between blood type groups and helping them understand each other, not by explaining one type to another in abstract terms, but by embodying both perspectives in real time. When Type O and Type A are in conflict, Type AB can hold both truths, can show Type O how Type A's structure serves groundedness, can show Type A how Type O's concreteness prevents structural delusion, not through argument, but through demonstration. This is why the tablet says convergence depends significantly on Type A. B fulfilling its function. Other blood types can develop flexibility, but Type AB is designed for it. When Type AB models fluid integration, it makes the impossible seem possible. It shows that blood type transcendence doesn't require abandoning your nature. It requires embracing all natures. But this only works if Type AB stops seeing fluidity as confusion, stops trying to become stable like other types, stops pathologizing its own design as a problem to be fixed. The tablet is explicit about this. Type AB's characteristic uncertainty isn't a bug, it's a feature. The capacity to hold multiple perspectives without premature resolution is exactly what convergence requires. The discomfort of not knowing is the price of wisdom that surpasses single perspective clarity. And when Type AB embraces this, something remarkable happens. The uncertainty transforms into what the tablet calls sovereign not knowing, a state where you're comfortable with ambiguity, where you can act effectively without needing complete certainty, where you trust the process of integration more than the destination of resolution. This sovereign not knowing is, according to the tablet, the consciousness state that humanity as a whole must develop, because the future is fundamentally uncertain. The challenges we face don't have clear answers. The solutions require collective improvisation rather than predetermined plans. And blood types that require certainty before action, primarily Type A, will struggle in this environment, while blood types that operate purely on intuition without structure, primarily Type B, will create chaos, and blood types that only trust physical evidence, primarily Type O, will miss non-physical opportunities. Only Type AB consciousness, comfortable with uncertainty while maintaining coherent action, is suited for the emerging reality. And this is why the tablet predicts Type AB will increase globally. Not through genetic engineering, but through evolutionary pressure. The environment is selecting for Type AB traits. But the tablet also warns that Type AB can't carry humanity through convergence alone. The other blood types are essential. Type AB without Type O grounding becomes unanchored fantasy. Type AB without Type A structure becomes dissociated chaos. Type AB without Type B, creativity becomes stagnant synthesis. Convergence requires all blood types operating at their highest expression while in conscious relationship with each other. This is the great work, not replacing blood type diversity with homogeneity, but elevating diversity into conscious cooperation. And the tablet describes what this looks like in practice. Communities organized around blood type symbiosis, where Type O individuals manage the physical infrastructure, Type A individuals maintain organizational systems, Type B individuals drive innovation and adaptation. Type A, B individuals facilitate communication and integration, not because of imposed roles, but because each type naturally gravitates toward what it does best, and because each type values the other's contributions as essential to the whole. In these communities, according to the tablet, conflict still exists. Blood types still clash over priorities and methods. But the conflict is productive rather than destructive. It's recognized as different parts of the collective intelligence working through problems from different angles. When Type O pushes back against Type A's complex plans as impractical, that's the physical reality check preventing delusional thinking. When Type B rebels against established structure, that's the creative renewal preventing stagnation. When Type A insists on careful analysis before action, that's the organizational intelligence preventing reckless mistakes. When Type AB refuses to choose sides, that's the integrative wisdom preventing premature resolution. Each type's characteristic behavior serves the whole. And when you see it this way, blood type differences become gifts rather than problems. But seeing it this way requires the awareness that you're part of a larger intelligence, that your individual consciousness, while real and valuable, is a specialized organ of a collective awareness. And this awareness is difficult for modern humans, conditioned to extreme individualism. The tablet suggests this individualism is itself blood-type programming amplified by culture. Type A civilization, with its emphasis on individual achievement and personal responsibility, has conditioned everyone to see themselves as isolated agents. Even Type O and Type B, who have different native consciousness modes, have been trained to think like Type A individualists. And this training serves those who benefit from human fragmentation, because isolated individuals are controllable. Collective intelligence coordinating across blood types is not. This is why the tablet says one of the primary barriers to convergence is the belief in separation. The conviction that you're fundamentally separate from other humans, that your consciousness is contained within your skull, that your interests are primarily individual rather than collective. These beliefs aren't true according to the tablet's cosmology. Consciousness isn't isolated in individual bodies. It's a field that bodies participate in, and blood-type programming determines how each body interfaces with that field, what frequency it attunes to, what information it can access. Type O attunes to what the tablet calls Earth consciousness, the collective awareness of the planet itself. This is why Type O individuals often have strong environmental sensitivity, why they feel distress when separated from nature, why they intuitively understand ecological relationships. Type A attunes to thought-form consciousness, the collective patterns of human cognition, the mental structures that organize civilization. This is why Type A individuals can sense cultural shifts before they manifest, why they understand institutional logic, why they can work effectively within abstract systems. Type B attunes to will consciousness, the collective creative force that drives evolution and change. This is why Type B individuals often feel restless, why they sense when systems are ready to transform, why they have intuitive knowing about future possibilities. Type AB attunes to what the tablet calls unified field consciousness, the awareness that contains and coordinates all other modes. This is why Type AB individuals often feel overwhelmed by too much information, why they can sense connections others miss, why they struggle with being limited to single perspectives, and none of these are superior or inferior. They're different access points to the same underlying reality, different ways the collective intelligence experiences itself. And convergence is about making all access points available to all individuals regardless of blood type. But here's where it gets complex. The tablet says that even after convergence, even after blood type flexibility is achieved, some specialization remains. Your birth blood type determines your primary access, your easiest path, your most natural mode. Type O will always find grounding easier than abstraction, even after developing analytical capacity. Type A will always find structure more natural than chaos, even after developing spontaneity. Type B will always prefer exploration to commitment, even after developing focus. Type AB will always tend toward complexity over simplicity, even after achieving integration. These aren't limitations to overcome. They're gifts to refine. Your blood type shows you where your genius lives, where your unique contribution to collective intelligence exists. And the work isn't to become equal in all modes. It's to master your native mode while developing enough flexibility in other modes to cooperate effectively, to be extraordinary in your domain while being competent across domains. This is the Type O path, becoming so grounded in physical reality that you can sense subtle energy patterns invisible to other types. Developing such refined body wisdom that you can detect environmental changes before instruments register them, making the physical world your laboratory for consciousness exploration. This is the Type A path. Developing such sophisticated analytical capacity that you can perceive patterns across centuries of human development, creating organizational systems so elegant they feel like art, using structure as a consciousness practice. This is the Type B path, cultivating such powerful will force that you can manifest intention into physical reality, becoming so attuned to evolutionary potential that you can sense what wants to emerge next, making creativity your spiritual discipline. And this is the Type AB path, developing such refined integration capacity that you can hold contradictions without cognitive dissonance, building internal space vast enough to contain all perspectives simultaneously, making paradox your meditation, each path leading to mastery, each mastery contributing to the whole, and the whole becoming greater than the sum of its parts. The tablet calls this state the awakened species. Not awakened in the sense of transcending physical reality or achieving enlightenment in traditional spiritual terms, but awakened to its own nature, conscious of its design, operating with awareness of blood-type programming while no longer being limited by it. And an awakened species, according to the tablet, is a sovereign species, one that can choose its own evolutionary direction, that can modify its own genetics if needed, that can interact with the Anunnaki or any other external intelligence as equals rather than as subjects. This is the liberation the tablet promises. Not freedom from blood types, but freedom through understanding them. Not escape from the body, but mastery of what the body was designed to do. But the tablet also warns that this liberation isn't guaranteed. It's a possibility, not a certainty. And whether humanity achieves it depends on choices being made right now. Individual choices, collective choices, choices about whether to continue blood type separation or move toward integration. And those choices are being made through every interaction. Every time a type O individual dismisses type A analysis as overthinking. Every time a type A individual pathologizes type B, spontaneity as reckless. Every time a type B individual rejects all structure as oppression. Every time a type AB individual fragments under the pressure of holding complexity. These are choices to remain in separation, to reinforce the programming, to reject convergence. But there are opposite choices available. Every time type O opens to abstraction, even when it feels impractical. Every time type A allows spontaneity, even when it feels chaotic. Every time type B commits to structure, even when it feels constraining. Every time type AB stays with integration, even when it feels fragmenting. These are choices toward convergence, toward sovereignty, toward liberation. And the tablet says these choices accumulate. That every individual who develops blood type flexibility makes it easier for the next individual. That consciousness evolution is collective even when the work is individual. There's a field effect. When enough humans achieve flexibility, the field shifts. And what was previously difficult becomes natural. What was previously rare becomes common. The species tips into a new baseline. The tablet doesn't specify how many humans reaching flexibility triggers the tipping point, but it suggests that type AB individuals count for more in this calculation, because type AB flexibility affects the field more strongly than other types' flexibility. One type AB achieving full integration creates more field shift than 10 type O individuals developing abstraction or 10 type A individuals developing spontaneity. Not because type AB is superior, but because type AB's function is specifically integration. When type AB fulfills its function, it activates integration capacity in all other types. This puts significant responsibility on type AB individuals. But the tablet warns against type AB seeing this as special or chosen. The responsibility isn't a privilege, it's a function. And if type AB fails to fulfill it, convergence simply takes longer. Other paths emerge. The species finds another way. But if type AB succeeds, convergence accelerates. The timeline compresses. What might have taken thousands of years happens in generations or decades. And there are signs this acceleration is already happening. The tablet describes markers of convergence beginning. And several of these markers are visible in current global conditions. The first marker is blood type mixing accelerating. More cross-type relationships. More type A type B pairings, producing type AB offspring. More genetic diversity within populations that were previously homogeneous. Global migration is one driver of this. As populations move and mix, blood type boundaries dissolve. The old geographic separations that kept type O populations in one region, type A in another, type B in a third, those separations are breaking down. And this isn't just demographic shift, it's evolutionary opportunity. Each mixed relationship is a mini laboratory for blood type symbiosis. Learning to live with someone who perceives reality fundamentally differently forces development of consciousness, flexibility. The second marker is increasing recognition of blood type personality correlations. More research being done. More people aware that blood type affects more than medical compatibility. More curiosity about the deeper patterns. This research is often dismissed as pseudoscience by mainstream institutions. but the tablet would say that dismissal is predictable. Type A-dominated scientific culture is threatened by evidence that consciousness can't be fully understood through analysis alone, that there are patterns operating below the level of rational explanation. But despite institutional resistance, the knowledge spreads. Popular culture picks it up. People notice correlations between blood type and behavior in their own lives. The pattern becomes undeniable, even without scientific validation, and this popular recognition matters more than institutional acceptance. Because convergence happens through collective consciousness shift, not through top-down authorization. The tablet says the people lead and institutions eventually follow. The third marker is the type AB population increase. As mentioned earlier, type AB is the fastest growing blood type globally, and this growth is accelerating. More type AB children being born each generation. From an evolutionary perspective, this suggests the species is selecting for type AB traits. The environment favors integration capacity over specialization, favors flexibility over fixed programming, favors complexity, tolerance over simplicity preference. And as type AB numbers increase, type AB influence on collective consciousness increases. The integration frequency becomes stronger in the field. Other blood types begin to resonate with it even if they're not type AB themselves. The fourth marker is what the tablet calls blood type confusion. Individuals whose blood type doesn't match their personality or health patterns. Type O, individuals with strong analytical minds. Type A, individuals with powerful spontaneity. Type B, individuals with unusual sustained focus. Type AB, individuals with surprising stability. These anomalies are increasing, and they're not errors. They're early expressions of blood type flexibility, the genetic programming loosening, the consciousness beginning to operate independent of biological constraints. The medical establishment sees these anomalies as mysteries to explain. The tablet says they're signs of evolution in progress. The fifth marker is the emergence of what the tablet calls blood type translators. Individuals who can operate across multiple blood type modes effectively. Who can speak type O language while thinking type A thoughts. Who can act with type B spontaneity while maintaining type A structure. These translators are appearing in increasing numbers, often in positions of leadership or influence, bridging different communities, creating common ground where none existed before. And many of these translators are type AB, but not all. The tablet notes that some type A individuals develop such refined flexibility that they can translate between types. Some type B individuals develop such sophisticated understanding that they can bridge perspectives. Even some type O individuals develop the capacity. This is convergence in action, not waiting for some future moment, but happening now through people who are learning to operate beyond their programming. The sixth marker is the crisis itself. The tablet says convergence only happens under pressure, that the species must face challenges beyond any single blood type's capacity to solve, challenges that force cooperation or extinction. And we're facing exactly these challenges. Climate change can't be solved by type O practical action alone, can't be solved by type A analysis and planning alone, can't be solved by type B innovation alone. Requires all types working together with unprecedented coordination. The same with artificial intelligence development, with nuclear weapons proliferation, with pandemic response, with economic inequality, with political polarization. Each challenge exceeds single-type solutions. These aren't random crises. The tablet suggests they're evolution's way of forcing humanity to transcend blood type separation. Pain and fear driving change that comfort and complacency never would. And this might be the ultimate answer to why the Anunnaki created blood type limitations. Not to keep humanity weak, but to ensure that we would eventually face challenges that require us to transcend those limitations, to force evolution through necessity. From this view, the programming is like training wheels, necessary for early development but meant to be removed once competence is achieved. And the challenges we face now are life telling us it's time to take the training wheels off. But removing them is terrifying. Operating without the familiar constraints of blood type programming feels like free fall, like losing identity, like not knowing who you are anymore. And the tablet acknowledges this fear, says it's valid, says the transition from program to sovereign consciousness is genuinely destabilizing. but also says the fear is precisely what must be faced. Because on the other side of that fear is something the tablet calls original consciousness, the awareness that existed before blood type programming, the human essence that the Anunnaki worked with when they created the different types. This original consciousness isn't naive or primitive, it's vast, unlimited by type-specific perceptions, capable of accessing all modes simultaneously. And according to the tablet, it's still present in every human, regardless of blood type. The programming didn't erase original consciousness, it covered it, created a filter through which original consciousness expresses. And blood type flexibility is about making that filter transparent, seeing through it to the awareness underneath. And when you access original consciousness, even briefly, everything changes. You realize you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions, you're not your blood type. You're the awareness that experiences all of those things. And that awareness doesn't belong to any category. It's not type O or type A or type B or type AB. It's the unchanging presence that watches thoughts arise and pass, the stillness beneath all movement. The tablet calls this the witness, and it says the witness is the same in all humans. Blood type affects what the witness observes, but the witness itself is identical across types. When type O consciousness accesses the witness, it recognizes the witness in type A, type B, and type AB. When type A accesses the witness, it sees the same awareness looking back from all other types. The witness reveals our fundamental unity beneath the programmed diversity, and this recognition is the beginning of true convergence. Not forced homogeneity, but conscious cooperation arising from seeing our shared essence. Working together not because we're the same, but because we recognize ourselves in each other despite our differences. The tablet describes practices for accessing the witness, and they're different for each blood type, because each type's programming blocks access in different ways. For type O, the path to the witness is through the body, through sensation, through practices that heighten physical awareness until you become conscious of the awareness itself. Movement meditation, breath work, sustained body scanning. The key for type O is recognizing that you're not the body sensations. You're what notices the sensations. You're the space in which physical experience arises. For type A, the path is through the mind, through watching thoughts, through practices that create enough mental space to see thinking as a process rather than truth. Meditation, metacognition, inquiry into the nature of thoughts themselves. The key for type A is recognizing that you're not the thoughts. You're what observes thoughts arising and passing. You're the screen on which mental content appears. For type B, the path is through will, through noticing the space between intention and action, through practices that heighten awareness of choice itself, decision observation, impulse witnessing, conscious delay between desire and response. The key for type B is recognizing that you're not the impulses. You're what chooses whether to act on them. You're the awareness that contains both desire and the freedom to respond. For type AB, the path is through the gaps, through the moments between identities, through practices that stabilize awareness during transitions, identity observation, perspective shifting, conscious movement between states without losing continuity. The key for type AB is recognizing that you're not any particular identity. You're what remains constant as identities shift. You're the continuous thread through all changes. And once accessed, the witness changes your relationship to blood type programming. You still have type O physiology, or type A cognition, or type B spontaneity, or type AB complexity. But you're no longer identified with it. You can use it consciously rather than being used by it. This is mastery. And the tablet says mastery is the goal. Not transcendence in the sense of escaping the body or the programming, but transcendence in the sense of consciously working with both. A master type in O operates through groundedness, but isn't limited to physical reality. A master type in A uses analytical thinking, but isn't trapped in analysis. A master type B expresses will, but isn't controlled by impulse. A master type AB integrates perspectives, but isn't lost in complexity. And when enough individuals reach mastery, the collective tips. The species becomes predominantly sovereign rather than predominantly programmed. And that's when the tablet says the Anunnaki can no longer control humanity, because control depends on predictability. And sovereign consciousness is unpredictable. It can't be manipulated through blood-type specific appeals, can't be divided through blood-type-based conflicts, can't be managed through genetic programming. This is the liberation the tablet promises. Not revolution or rebellion against the Anunnaki, but evolution beyond their control mechanisms. Becoming a species they must negotiate with rather than manage. And the tablet suggests the Anunnaki know this is happening, that they're watching humanity's evolution. Some Anunnaki factions supporting convergence, some resisting it, some simply observing with curiosity about how it will unfold. The outcome isn't predetermined, it depends on human choices, on whether enough individuals do the work of accessing the witness, developing blood-type flexibility, and choosing cooperation over separation. And this brings us to the final section of the tablet, the part that addresses you directly, the reader, the one who's made it this far. If you've read this entire text, you're not a casual observer. Something in you resonates with this information. Something recognizes it as true, at least partially. And that recognition matters, because the tablet says, awareness is causative. Your consciousness reading these words affects reality, changes probability fields, influences outcomes. By understanding blood-type programming, you begin to loosen your own programming. By seeing the possibility of convergence, you make convergence more likely. By accessing the witness, you strengthen the witness field for everyone. This isn't metaphor. According to the tablet's cosmology, consciousness is fundamental. Physical reality emerges from awareness, not the other way around, and collective human consciousness shapes what's possible at the species level. Your individual awakening contributes to collective awakening. Your blood-type flexibility makes flexibility easier for others. Your choice toward integration shifts the field toward convergence, and the tablet says this is why it was written. Not to inform passively, but to activate, to trigger recognition in those ready to remember, to catalyze evolution in those willing to participate. If you're type O, the tablet is reminding you that groundedness is gift, not limitation. That your connection to physical reality is desperately needed, but doesn't have to prevent understanding complexity. That you have permission to think abstractly while maintaining practical wisdom. If you're type A, the tablet is reminding you that your analytical capacity is brilliant, but not complete. That other ways of knowing are valid even when they can't be proven. That you can trust spontaneity while maintaining structure. If you're type B, the tablet is reminding you that your independence is valuable, but not sufficient. That cooperation enhances rather than diminishes freedom. That you can commit without surrendering authenticity. And if you're type AB, the tablet is reminding you that your complexity isn't confusion. That your inability to choose single truths is actually wisdom. That your discomfort with certainty is perfectly suited for the uncertainty ahead. For all types, the message is the same. You're more than your programming. And humanity needs you to discover what that more is. The convergence isn't something that will happen to you. It's something you create through daily choices, through how you interact with different blood types, through whether you seek to understand or to convince, through whether you value diversity or demand conformity. Every interaction is a practice opportunity. Every conversation with someone who sees reality differently than you do is a chance to develop flexibility. Every moment of recognizing your own blood type programming is a step towards sovereignty. And the tablet says, the time for this work is now, not because of some predetermined timeline or prophesied date, but because the challenges facing humanity won't wait. They're here, they're urgent. They require coordination across blood types that we don't yet have, but we can develop it. The capacity exists. The blueprint is in the genetic code. The possibility is proven by individuals who've already achieved blood type flexibility. You're reading the map that was left for you. The question is what you'll do with it. Will you dismiss this as interesting but ultimately irrelevant? Return to unconscious operation through your blood type programming? Continue the patterns that led to our current crisis? Or will you experiment? Test the tablet's claims against your own experience. Deliberately practice operating outside your comfortable blood type mode. Seek genuine understanding of how different types perceive reality. The tablet can't make this choice for you. No one can. This is the meaning of sovereignty. The freedom to choose is also the responsibility to choose. And whatever you choose reverberates beyond your individual life. Your consciousness affects the collective field. Your evolution accelerates or delays species evolution. This might sound like pressure, like being told you're responsible for humanity's fate, but the tablet frames it differently. It says you're an essential but not exclusive contributor. Your part matters, but you're not carrying the whole. You're one cell in a vast body. And just like cells in a physical body, you don't need to know the whole organism's plan. You just need to fulfill your function. Express your unique gifts, cooperate with adjacent cells, trust the larger intelligence coordinating everything. For Type O, that means staying grounded while opening to other perspectives. For Type A, it means maintaining structure while allowing spontaneity. For Type B, it means pioneering new possibilities while respecting existing wisdom. For Type AB, it means integrating all perspectives while maintaining coherence. Do your part. Let others do theirs. And trust that the convergence will emerge from millions of individuals doing their parts simultaneously. This is the great work the tablet describes. Not a single project with a defined endpoint, but an ongoing process of collective evolution. Humanity growing up, becoming conscious of its design, choosing its next stage. And you're here for it. Your existence at this moment in history isn't random. Your blood type isn't accident. Your capacity to understand these words means something. The Anunnaki might have created the programming, but you decide what happens next. Now, what is your blood type, and what will you do with what you now know about it? The tablet doesn't end with that question. It continues into what scholars call the application section. Detailed instructions for working with blood type programming in practical, everyday contexts. This isn't mystical abstraction, it's operational guidance. The text begins with diagnosis. How to recognize when you're operating unconsciously from blood type programming versus consciously using your type's gifts. And the markers are different for each type. Type O unconscious operation looks like rigid insistence on physical proof before considering possibilities, dismissing ideas as impractical without genuine investigation, feeling threatened by abstraction, retreating into comfort of the familiar and tangible when challenged. Type O. Conscious operation looks like confident groundedness that can entertain abstract concepts without losing practical wisdom. Asking how theoretical ideas translate into physical reality rather than dismissing them outright. Being the voice of embodied truth in rooms full of mental speculation. The difference is openness. Unconscious Type O is closed to anything beyond immediate sensory experience. Conscious Type O is grounded in physical reality while remaining curious about what lies beyond it. Type unconscious operation looks like analysis paralysis. Overplanning to the point of never acting. Creating complex systems that serve the system rather than actual goals. Getting lost in mental constructs and losing touch with what's actually happening in present moment reality. Type A conscious operation looks like elegant analysis that serves clear purpose. Structure that enables rather than constrains. Plans sophisticated enough to handle complexity, but flexible enough to adapt when reality deviates from projection. The difference is purpose. Unconscious Type A analyzes for its own sake, finding comfort in complexity. Conscious Type A uses analysis as a tool toward clearly defined outcomes. Type B, unconscious operation, looks like reactivity masked as independence. Automatic rejection of anything that feels constraining. Burning down existing structures without viable alternatives. Confusing chaos with freedom. Type B, conscious operation, looks like discerning creativity. Knowing which structures to disrupt and which to work within. Understanding that real innovation often requires deep mastery of existing forms before transcending them. Rebellion that serves evolution rather than ego. The difference is intention. Unconscious Type B rebels by default. Conscious Type B chooses disruption strategically when it genuinely serves transformation. Type A B unconscious operation looks like fragmentation disguised as complexity. Adopting multiple perspectives without integrating them. Shifting between viewpoints based on social context rather than wisdom. Using nuance as excuse for never committing to clear positions. Type B conscious operation looks like genuine integration, holding multiple truths while maintaining internal coherence. Shifting perspectives based on what serves collective understanding rather than personal comfort. Using complexity to build bridges rather than to avoid responsibility. The difference is coherence. Unconscious Type A B is scattered across perspectives. Conscious Type A B flows between perspectives while maintaining centered awareness. and the tablet provides specific practices for shifting from unconscious to conscious operation. These aren't meditation techniques or spiritual exercises, though those can help. They're concrete interventions you can apply in daily situations. For Type O making the shift to consciousness, the practice is called grounding into question. When you feel resistance to abstract ideas, instead of dismissing them, ground more deeply into your body while holding the question. Feel your feet on the floor, notice your breath, and from that stable foundation ask, what if this were true? How would physical reality reflect it? This keeps Type O's gift of groundedness while opening to possibilities beyond immediate evidence. It's not about abandoning physical knowing, it's about using physical stability as a platform for exploring conceptual territory. The tablet gives a specific example. When someone presents an idea that seems impractical or impossible to Type O consciousness, the automatic response is, that won't work in the real world. The conscious response is, how would that work in the real world? What would have to be true for this to function physically? The question shifts everything, from closed rejection to open investigation, from defensive dismissal to curious exploration. And often, Type O discovers that what seemed impossible actually has physical mechanisms that could work. The idea wasn't impractical. Type O's initial assessment was incomplete. This practice builds Type O's capacity for abstraction while honoring the blood type's core gift. You don't lose practical wisdom, you augment it with conceptual flexibility. For Type A making the shift, the practice is called collapse to action. When you notice analysis spiraling, creating complexity for its own sake, you consciously collapse the thinking into a single action. Ask yourself, if I could only do one thing right now based on everything I know, what would it be? Then do that thing, before allowing more analysis. This interrupts Type A's tendency toward infinite preparation. It forces engagement with reality rather than mental models of reality. And paradoxically, acting before the analysis feels complete often provides data that makes subsequent analysis more accurate. The tablet emphasizes that this isn't about abandoning Type A's analytical gift. It's about using analysis in service of action rather than as a substitute for action. Analysis should lead to decision and implementation. When it doesn't, it's unconscious operation. The specific example given is planning projects. Type A unconscious operation creates comprehensive plans that cover every contingency. But the time spent planning means opportunities are missed, conditions change, and the plan is outdated before implementation begins. Type A conscious operation creates minimal viable plans. Enough structure to begin with clarity, but not so much structure that adaptation becomes impossible. Then acts, gathers real data from reality, and refines the plan based on what actually happens rather than projected scenarios. This builds Type A's capacity for spontaneity and adaptive response while maintaining the gift of systematic thinking. For Type B making the shift, the practice is commitment as experiment. When Type B feels resistance to commitment or structure, reframe it as a temporary experiment. I'm choosing to work within this structure for a defined period to see what I can learn from the constraints. This allows Type B to engage with sustained focus without triggering the programming that equates structure with oppression. It's not permanent imprisonment, it's voluntary exploration of a different mode. The tablet gives the example of Type B in employment context. The unconscious response to workplace rules and hierarchies is rebellion or escape, constant job changes, resistance to authority, inability to commit to long-term roles. The conscious response is choosing employment strategically based on what you want to learn or accomplish, then committing fully for a defined period. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year, but during that period, you work within the structure rather than against it. And Type B discovers something unexpected. Real mastery often requires sustained engagement with limitations. The constraint itself becomes the catalyst for creativity. The structure you thought would crush independence actually develops capacities that make true independence possible. This builds Type B's capacity for sustained focus while maintaining the gift of creative freedom. For Type AB making the shift, the practice is integration through embodiment. When Type AB feels fragmented across perspectives, the practice is to physically embody each perspective fully before attempting synthesis. Actually stand in one position and speak from Type O groundedness, then move to different physical location and speak from Type A analysis. Then move again and speak from Type B spontaneity. This prevents the characteristic type AB pattern of rapid mental switching without full embodiment. By giving each perspective physical location and full expression, type AB can integrate them without collapse or confusion. The tablet's example is type AB in decision-making situations. The unconscious response is paralysis, seeing too many valid options, unable to choose because every perspective has truth. The conscious response is giving full voice to each perspective, then asking what integrates them all. Not choosing one perspective over others, but finding the meta position that honors all perspectives while enabling clear action. For instance, choosing a career path. Type O voice might say, I need something physically engaging and concretely meaningful. Type A voice might say, I need structure and opportunity for systematic development. Type B voice might say, I need creative freedom and space for innovation. Unconscious type AB hears these as contradictory and freezes. Conscious type AB asks, what path includes all of these? And often discovers options that weren't visible when trying to choose from single perspective. This builds type AB's capacity for decisive integration while maintaining the gift of multi-perspective awareness. And the tablet emphasizes that these practices aren't one-time exercises. They're lifetime disciplines. Blood type programming is deep. It doesn't dissolve with single insight or brief practice. It requires consistent, sustained effort to develop flexibility, but the effort compounds. Each time you successfully operate outside your unconscious programming, it gets slightly easier the next time. The neural pathways develop, the consciousness flexibility increases. Over years of practice, what was initially difficult becomes natural. The tablet describes this progression in stages, and it warns that each stage has characteristic challenges and potential traps. Stage 1 is recognition. You become aware that you have blood type programming. You start noticing patterns in your own behavior that match your type's characteristics. This stage is exciting. The framework explains so much about yourself and others. The trap at this stage is over-identification, using blood type as excuse for limitation. I'm type O, so I can't think abstractly. I'm type B, so I can't commit to anything long-term. The programming becomes identity rather than pattern to work with. The way through is remembering that recognition is the beginning, not the end. Seeing the programming is the first step toward transcending it. Stage 2 is resistance. You attempt to operate against your programming. Type O, forcing yourself to engage with abstract ideas even when it's uncomfortable. Type A, deliberately acting without complete analysis. Type B, committing to structure despite internal rebellion. Type A, B, attempting stable single perspective focus. This stage is frustrating. The biology fights back. You experience the symptoms the tablet warned about. Physical discomfort, mental fog, anxiety, claustrophobia, identity confusion. The trap at this stage is giving up, deciding that blood type limitations are fixed, that transcendence is impossible, that you should just accept your type's boundaries and stop trying to expand. The way through is recognizing resistance as progress. The discomfort means you're pushing against actual programming. If it were easy, it wouldn't be creating real change. The challenge is to persist through discomfort without forcing so hard that you damage yourself. Stage 3 is integration. You develop genuine capacity to operate in modes outside your native type. Not just intellectually understanding other perspectives, but actually being able to embody them when needed. The flexibility becomes real. This stage is empowering. You discover you're more than you thought. That blood type programming created real limitations, but not permanent ones. That consciousness can expand beyond genetic boundaries. The trap at this stage is superiority. Believing you've transcended while others remain stuck. Judging people still operating from unconscious programming. Losing compassion for the struggle because you've forgotten how hard it was. The way through is humility. Remembering that you're still learning. That integration is ongoing, not achieved. That people at earlier stages deserve support, not judgment. Stage 4 is mastery. You can move fluidly between blood type modes based on what circumstances require. The programming is still present, still influencing you, but it's no longer controlling you. You use it consciously rather than being used by it. This stage is subtle. The dramatic shifts of earlier stages are gone. You're not fighting programming or forcing flexibility. It flows naturally. And from the outside, you might not look that different from someone in stage 1. The change is internal. The trap at this stage is complacency. Assuming you're done. That mastery is endpoint rather than plateau. That you've achieved all possible flexibility. The way through is remembering that mastery opens new territory. That there are levels of integration beyond what you've currently accessed. That the work continues but at subtler levels. And the tablet says most humans never progress beyond stage 1. They recognize blood type patterns, find the framework interesting, maybe share it with friends. But they don't do the actual work of developing flexibility. And that's fine. Not everyone is called to this path. But for those who are called, for those reading this text who feel resonance with the work, the tablet offers encouragement. It says the path is difficult, but not impossible. That every stage has been walked by humans before you. That you're not alone in this work, even if it feels isolating. And more than that, the tablet says the work gets easier with each generation. That parents who develop blood type flexibility pass epigenetic changes to their children. That children born to conscious parents start at stage 2 rather than stage 1. That the species is building momentum toward convergence through accumulated individual efforts. This is why your personal work matters beyond your individual life. You're not just liberating yourself, you're making liberation easier for those who come after. Your consciousness development literally changes the genetic expression of your descendants. Modern epigenetics supports this. Environmental influences and consciousness practices create methylation patterns that get inherited. Your grandchildren will have different gene expression based on the work you do now. The tablet describes this as blood type evolution in real time. The species not waiting for random mutation to create blood type flexibility, but actively developing it through conscious practice. And that conscious development getting encoded and passed forward. This is how convergence accelerates, not just through field effects, but through actual biological inheritance, each generation starting with more flexibility than the previous generation needed to develop. And if you're type AB, reading this, the tablet has specific message. Your children, if you have them, will likely be type AB, and they'll inherit your integration capacity or your fragmentation, depending on which you develop. If you achieve genuine integration, your type AB children start life with that capacity already partially developed. If you remain fragmented, they inherit fragmentation and must work from there. This puts additional weight on type AB to do the work. Not because type AB is more important, but because type AB's function is specifically integration, and that function is heritable. Type O children inherit their type O parents' relationship to groundedness. Type A children inherit analytical patterns. Type B children inherit creative capacity. But all of these are relatively stable. The programming is strong and consistent across generations. Type AB is different. The programming is unstable by design, which means type AB children are particularly susceptible to their parents' consciousness state. More than other types, type AB inheritance is consciousness-based rather than purely genetic. This is why the tablet says type AB carries special responsibility. Not privilege or superiority, but actual transmission responsibility. The consciousness work you do determines what you pass forward. And this brings us to the tablet's discussion of parenting across blood types. Because one of the most common places blood type conflict manifests is between parents and children of different types. Type O parent with type A child often struggles with the child's need for complexity and mental stimulation. The parent sees the child as overthinking, impractical, lost in their head. The child experiences the parent as simplistic, anti-intellectual, dismissive of ideas. The tablet says this conflict is programmed. Type O parenting instincts prioritize physical safety and practical skills. Type A children need conceptual development and systematic learning. Neither approach is wrong, but they're incompatible without conscious awareness. The conscious type O parent recognizes their child's different wiring and supports conceptual development even when it feels uncomfortable. Provides books, engages with ideas, asks questions that stimulate analysis, and balances this with grounding activities that keep the type A child connected to physical reality. Type A parent with type B child faces opposite challenge. The parent wants structure, plans, systematic development. The child needs exploration, spontaneity, creative freedom. The parent sees the child as chaotic and undisciplined. The child experiences the parent as controlling and oppressive. Again, the programming creates conflict. Type A, parenting instincts prioritize structure and achievement. Type B, children need space to discover their own path through trial and error. The conscious Type A parent maintains enough structure to keep the child safe while allowing much more freedom than feels comfortable. Tolerates the mess, supports the experiments, trusts the process even when it looks like chaos. Type B, parent with Type O child, often struggles with providing the stability the child needs. The parent's natural restlessness and resistance to routine creates anxiety in a child whose programming requires consistency and predictability. The conscious Type B parent recognizes this and deliberately creates stable routines for the child even while maintaining personal freedom, separates their need for novelty from their child's need for groundedness. Type A, B parent with any other type faces unique challenge. Type AB wants to support all modes of development but struggles with consistency. The child never knows which parent they're getting. Type O grounded parent one day, Type A structured parent the next, Type B spontaneous parent the day after. The conscious Type AB parent works to maintain stable core while expressing flexibility. The child experiences consistent love and presence even as the parent's modes shift. And children of Type AB parents benefit tremendously if the parent achieves integration. They witness firsthand that fluidity doesn't mean instability, that you can hold multiple truths while remaining coherent. This becomes their model for their own development. But the tablet also addresses the reality that most parents won't read this text, won't understand blood type programming, won't consciously work with their children's different wiring. And it says that's okay, that the parent-child blood type conflict itself is a teaching, that children who struggle with parents of different types develop flexibility earlier than children whose parents share their type. The Type O child forced to navigate Type A parent's mental world develops abstraction earlier. The Type A child dealing with Type B parent's spontaneity develops adaptability. The Type B child managing Type O parent's resistance to change develops patience. The conflict, while painful, creates growth. And the tablet suggests this might be part of the design. That blood types mixing in family systems creates natural pressure toward flexibility without requiring conscious awareness of the programming. From this view, every family is a mini laboratory for blood type convergence. And the seemingly random distribution of blood types within family systems isn't random at all. It's optimized for creating maximum developmental pressure. The Type O parent, Type A child, and Type B child all in one household forces everyone to develop flexibility just to maintain family coherence. The challenges that seem like problems are actually evolution accelerators, but conscious awareness makes the process less painful. When family members understand they're operating from different consciousness programming, they can have compassion for the conflict, can see it as difference rather than deficiency, can work with it rather than against it, and the tablet provides specific communication strategies for cross-blood type dialogue. Because one of the biggest barriers to understanding is assuming everyone processes information the same way you do. When speaking to Type O, lead with concrete examples. Don't start with theory or abstraction. Give them something tangible to ground into, then build conceptual framework around it. Type O learns through demonstration more than explanation. When speaking to Type A, provide structure and clear logic. Type A needs to understand how pieces fit together, how A leads to B leads to C. Random information without organizational framework feels chaotic and overwhelming. When speaking to Type B, honor their autonomy. Never present information as you must or you should. Frame it as possibility or invitation. Type B shuts down when they feel forced, but opens readily when they feel freedom of choice. When speaking to Type AB, acknowledge complexity. Don't try to simplify everything into single clear message. Type AB thinks in layers and nuance. Trying to reduce complexity for them feels patronizing. And when Type O tries to communicate with Type A, the challenge is articulating what Type O knows through body and experience in abstract terms that Type A can analyze. Type O tends to say, "It just is," or "I can feel it's right." Type A needs more than that. The solution is for Type O to translate physical knowing into conceptual language. When I engage with this directly, I notice specific sensations that correlate with accuracy in my past experience. That gives type A something to analyze while honoring type O's embodied wisdom. When type A tries to communicate with type B, the challenge is presenting structure without triggering type B's rebellion. Type A's natural communication includes lots of should and must and systematic organization. Type B hears this as control. The solution is for type A to present analysis as observation rather than prescription. Here's the pattern I notice. Here are potential implications. What do you see? This gives type B space to come to their own conclusions rather than feeling forced. When type B tries to communicate with type O, the challenge is that type B operates from intuition and possibility, while type O needs physical evidence. Type B says, "I sense this is the direction," or "I'm drawn toward this option." Type O thinks that's not good enough. The solution is for type B to ground intuition in physical terms. I don't have concrete evidence yet, but I'm willing to run small physical tests to see if the intuition has merit. This respects type O's need for tangible proof while honoring type B's intuitive knowing. And type AB trying to communicate with anyone faces the challenge of their multi-layered thinking being too complex for single perspective types to follow. Type AB sees all the nuances and connections. Other types want clear bottom line. The solution is for type AB to explicitly separate the layers. From type O perspective, this looks like X. From type A perspective, it looks like Y. From type B perspective, it looks like Z. And here's how all three can be simultaneously true. This makes type AB's integration process visible rather than mysterious. The tablet spends significant text on these communication patterns because misunderstanding across blood types is one of the primary barriers to cooperation. And most misunderstanding comes from assuming others process information like you do. When you understand that different blood types literally perceive reality through different filters, miscommunication becomes expected rather than surprising. And you can adapt your communication to bridge the gap rather than forcing others to operate in your mode. This communication flexibility is itself a convergence practice. Each time you successfully translate between blood type languages, you're building neural pathways for operating across modes. You're developing the consciousness flexibility that convergence requires. And the beautiful thing is that this practice benefits everyone involved, not just the person doing the translating. When type O receives information in body-based language, they open more readily. When type A gets structured analysis, they engage more deeply. When type B feels autonomous, they contribute more creatively. When type AB gets honored complexity, they integrate more effectively. Everyone wins when communication honors blood type differences. The entire interaction quality improves. More understanding, more cooperation, more collective intelligence emerging from diverse perspectives. This is convergence in microcosm, and the tablet says these micro-convergences accumulate into macro-convergence. Every successful cross-blood type interaction makes the next interaction slightly easier. The collective consciousness learns, the species adapts, and we can track this adaptation. Studies on global cooperation show increasing capacity for cross-cultural coordination over past decades. Projects that would have been impossible 50 years ago are now routine. Not because humans are smarter, but because we've developed better communication across difference. The tablet would say this reflects increasing blood type flexibility at population level. As more individuals develop conscious awareness of their programming, the collective capacity expands. And that expanded capacity makes large-scale cooperation more accessible. Climate accords, international scientific collaboration, global health initiatives. These require unprecedented coordination across vastly different cultures and perspectives. The fact that they're happening at all, however imperfectly, suggests the species is developing integration capacity. But the tablet also warns that cooperation under crisis pressure is fragile, that true convergence requires more than emergency coordination. It requires fundamental shift in how humans relate to difference. Currently, cooperation across difference is strategic. We work together because we have to, not because we want to. Or we tolerate other perspectives because the alternative is worse, not because we genuinely value those perspectives. This creates unstable peace. The moment crisis pressure decreases, cooperation fragments. Groups retreat to their own perspectives. Old conflicts re-emerge, the temporary unity dissolves. True convergence, according to the tablet, means genuine appreciation of difference. Actively seeking out perspectives different from your own, not because you have to, but because you recognize their value, experiencing other blood types' contributions as gifts rather than obstacles. And this requires seeing through the programming to the purpose. Understanding that Type O groundedness serves collective wisdom, that Type A structure enables collective action, that Type B creativity drives collective evolution, that Type A-B integration coordinates collective consciousness. When you see this, difference stops being threat and becomes resource. You want Type O's physical reality check. You seek Type A's organizational clarity. You value Type B's innovative disruption. You trust Type A-B's integrative synthesis. This is the shift from tolerance to appreciation, from strategic cooperation to genuine symbiosis. And the tablet says this shift is the marker of actual convergence beginning, and we're seeing early signs. Younger generations, particularly those born after 2000, show different attitudes toward difference. More comfort with ambiguity, more appreciation of diversity, more facility with holding multiple perspectives. This isn't just cultural shift. The tablet would say it reflects increasing genetic flexibility. Children inheriting their parents' consciousness development, each generation starting with more integration capacity than the previous. And if this acceleration continues, the tablet predicts convergence reaching critical mass within 3 to 4 generations, roughly 75 to 100 years from now. Not complete convergence, but enough population-level flexibility that the old blood type-based conflicts become obsolete. By that point, according to the timeline described in the text, humanity will be facing challenges that make current crises look trivial. Environmental systems collapsing, artificial intelligence surpassing human cognition, potential contact with non-human intelligence, and these challenges will absolutely require blood type convergence. They literally cannot be addressed by fragmented humanity. So convergence isn't optional, it's survival necessity. The only question is whether we develop flexibility consciously through intentional practice or unconsciously through crisis-forcing cooperation. The tablet says, conscious development is less painful and more likely to succeed. That waiting for crisis to force change means suffering that could be avoided. That the work can begin now, before emergency makes it mandatory. And that work begins exactly where you are, with your blood type, with your programming, with your daily interactions with people who perceive reality differently than you do. You don't need to join special groups or follow complex practices. You don't need teachers or gurus. You need awareness of your own patterns and willingness to stretch beyond them. Notice when you're operating from unconscious programming. Notice the automatic dismissal of perspectives different from yours. Notice the comfort of staying within your type's boundaries. And then make different choice, small choice, not dramatic transformation, but incremental flexibility. Type O entertaining one abstract idea instead of dismissing it. Type A taking one action before analysis feels complete. Type B honoring one commitment that feels constraining. Type AB maintaining one coherent position despite seeing all perspectives. These small choices accumulate. Over time, they transform your relationship to your programming. You develop what the tablet calls conscious blood type sovereignty, operating through your type consciously, rather than being operated by it unconsciously. And this sovereignty is contagious. People around you feel it. They witness you moving beyond limitations they thought were fixed. And that witnessing activates possibility in them. They begin their own exploration. This is how convergence spreads. Not through mass movements or institutional changes, but through individuals developing flexibility and transmitting that flexibility through presence and example. You are the transmission. Your consciousness work ripples through every relationship, every interaction, every conversation. You can't see the full impact, but the tablet assures you it's real and it's cumulative. Every person who develops blood type flexibility makes flexibility more accessible to everyone. The morphic field strengthens, the collective consciousness evolves, and humanity moves, step by incremental step, toward the convergence that's been written into the genetic code since the Anunnaki first created the blood type distinctions. The map was left in the tablet. The capacity was built into the design. And you, reading this now, are part of the awakening that makes liberation actual rather than merely potential. What you do with your blood type programming matters, not just for you, but for the species, for the collective future that's trying to emerge through millions of individual choices toward consciousness over programming. The Sumerian tablet that describes blood types says each was made for a different purpose. And that's true. But the ultimate purpose of all four types working together is something greater than the Anunnaki may have intended. It's humanity becoming sovereign, conscious, free. And that freedom begins with you, with your choice. Right now, in this moment, to see your blood type as programming rather than identity, to work with it consciously, to develop flexibility, to contribute your small but essential part to species evolution. The great work is calling, and your blood knows the answer.